Good afternoon. This meeting of the Pontiac City Council is hereby called to order at 3:04 p.m. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, Clerk Grandison.
Carrington,
Present.
Goodman,
Here.
James, McGinnis,
Present.
Nicholson.
Here.
Parker,
Here.
Rutherford. Mr. President, there's 2 councilwomen that are missing today.
Quorum being established, can I please have a motion to excuse council members James and Rutherford for personal reasons?
So moved. Support.
Moved by Goodman, seconded by Carrington. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call on the motion to authorize the excusing of council members James and Rutherford from the meeting for personal reasons. Roll call, Clerk Grandison.
Goodman,
Yes.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Nicholson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Carrington.
Yes.
0.
That motion carries. Can I please have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Support.
Moved by Parker, seconded by Carrington. Could I have a motion to amend the agenda to add a number 5, Parking Enterprise Fund, and a number 6, additional funds as needed? So that would be adding just a 5 and a 6 5 being the Parking Enterprise Fund, and 6 being other funds or resources that we wanted to discuss that haven't been deliberated upon yet. Any discussion?
I make a motion.
Oh, yeah. Well, now we have a motion. Is there a second? It's been moved by Carrington, seconded by Goodman, that we amend the agenda accordingly, adding those items 5 and 6. Hearing no discussion, roll call on that amendment. Clerk Grandison.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Nicholson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Carrington.
Yes.
Goodman.
Yes.
5-0.
That motion carries. Are there any other changes, questions, or debate on the agenda before us as amended? Hearing no further discussion, we shall vote now on approving the agenda as amended. Roll call. Clerk Grandison.
McGinnis,
Yes.
Nicholson.
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Carrington.
Yes.
Goodman.
Yes.
5-0.
That motion carries. All right. With that, we are at Finance. Give the floor to the administration.
Good afternoon, all. So we do have the finance director here, and right now we're at finance administration, correct?
That works.
All right.
Good afternoon, Council. So this afternoon, we are presenting to you a number of budgets. I will be starting off with Finance Administration, and that includes, within the Finance Department, we have a number of different divisions. When we speak of Finance Administration, we're specifically speaking about the Finance Director, the Accounts Payable, Purchasing, are amongst the divisions directly within Finance Administration. I'll also included, as you see under this, I included the budget for accounting. Within the recommended budget, we are proposing a pretty substantive change in the way that the city and the finance department have been operating. As you know, for a number of years, we've been using Plant Moran for our essentially outsourcing our accounting function or the controller's office. We're now proposing to bring that in-house, and I will cover some of that with you this afternoon. But again, the first two items are the finance administration inclusive of the accounting budget. And as I stated, previously we had been working with Plant Moran. You see under the Department 201, you see the accounting, under accounting, you see the other professional services. That was the line item that Plant Moran has been paid out of. In place of that, starting at this fiscal year, we're looking to replace that service with in-house employees. As I get into the finance administration budget, we've added a couple positions to the finance administration budget. And essentially, the accounting is essentially a one line, mainly a one line item, and we're reducing that down to $120,000 in order to allow us for potentially bringing some outside consulting services as we go through the fiscal year, as we transition to bringing these things in house. Most specifically, identifying any needs that we may have as we go into the audit prep. The state requires us to have our audit completed 6 months from the end of our fiscal year, which is December 31st, and we really get that process started sometime in the July timeframe. So we expect that there's going to be a lot going on with the department, and we want to have funding for us to be able to, on an as-needed basis, again, bring in those services to help us with additional resources. And the initial concern is going to be with making sure that we begin our audit preparation in a timely fashion so that we can meet the state's required deadline. So that's really it for Department 201. Moving down to the, I'm sorry.
201. Councilman Nicholson?
Can you help me understand under professional services, the activity, how do we get a number that is higher in activity through the end of June, if those are actual numbers, rather than what the projected activity is through the end of the fiscal year?
So there had been a couple items that have been booked into that account that will ultimately get moved to another account. Plant Moran has provided a number of different services. They did some work for the prior administration related to what we call a GFOA accounting award or accounting budget. And so as we go through the year-end process, we'll be getting everything allocated to the correct general ledger account. But they were on a fixed, they were essentially on a fixed monthly item there.
Thank you.
Other discussion about accounting, 201, Councilman Parker.
I just have, obviously, you look like you dropped about, well, pretty close to about $160,000. Is that going to be realized in the accounting, the finance administration budget?
So we have reduced that down to 120,000. Not sure if we're going to spend all of that, but some of that savings has certainly been picked up on the employee side. And as we get into the finance administration 206 budget, we'll get into those numbers. But to answer your question, yes, some of those savings from there are being incurred on the employees that we're going to have to bring in-house to perform these services.
Okay.
Other discussion on accounting, Legislative Council Sharp.
Just a quick question. So the Plant Moran is in that 201818, correct?
By and large, correct.
And so their contract ended yesterday?
Correct, May 31st.
Is there any extension that's going to be given or no?
There's currently no discussion of that. I'm not sure even if we wanted to, if they even have the bandwidth to do that. A number of accounting firms are pretty tight for labor right now, so I don't know to what extent they could even fulfill that request, and we haven't been contemplating that on our end.
So the other two accountants, would they start in then July, or are you looking to bring them on before July?
So we are looking to add those positions as of July 1st. Currently, we have a deputy director that has been and will continue to assist with those services for the month of June. But we don't have any additional positions budgeted, so we're going to, for the month of June, we're going to use the resources that we currently have available and then look to add those positions, add that other position beginning in July.
Have those positions been posted yet?
They have not.
Understood. I'd like to recognize Councilwoman James as present voting at 3:12 p.m. We are on Department 201 for accounting. Any further discussion on accounting? What is the name of the firm? It's in the city council budget that we use for the annual audit.
Raymond.
And
Right.
that the anticipation is that would be the same firm that we will continue with.
Yeah, so we haven't issued an RFP. That really is a fairly extended process to get a new auditor, and certainly I think with the changes that we're making, because Plant Moran has for a number of years worked in terms of the annual closeout process as well as the audit prep process, working with the city and working with our outside auditors. Because we're making that change, I certainly don't want to have all new people working on the audit. We have the state limits the number of years that you can have one auditor, and we're still up under that.
We have not hit that cap.
Correct.
But Plant Moran would not be eligible to submit a proposal based in terms of their working operations. They would not be a contender.
I would expect that would be a conflict. I can't say exactly, but I would not be comfortable in bringing them in as an auditor if it's not a technical conflict, which I'm almost certain that it would be. I would not, I would not recommend engaging them for that specific reason.
I would share that concern. Other discussion on accounting. Councilman Parker.
Just one other question. So if they're not eligible for the auditing position, are they eligible for those who have worked here to apply for the position once they become posted?
There wouldn't be anything barring them from working in-house, because essentially those positions are the same. It's the same work that those employees, in theory, have been doing. The audit is separate. They're required to have an independent status. So I don't think someone from Plant Moran could go and work on the audit, because they wouldn't. Somebody who's been working on the Pontiacs contract from Plant Moran couldn't go work on the audit because that, I believe, would be a conflict. But in terms of the services, it's the same services that had been outsourced that we're now bringing in-house. I hadn't thought about that, but I don't see a conflict there.
So that being the case, we haven't offered any positions or said they were available for them to apply to? And if so, have we approached their company in regards to that, and would there be a finder's fee?
So great question, Councilman. Very short, easy answer. No, we have not approached. We have not approached Plant Moran to ask any of their workers if they would want to transition over to the city. A couple more slightly detailed items. So we had the contract with Plant Moran. We had that contract for many years. Plant Moran, at one of our council meetings, it was noted to you that Plant Moran came to the administration and wanted to change the complete nature of the contract, which was actually going to increase the cost. Right. And so at that point in time, we made the decision that we were no longer going to contract services with them long term. And so they ended they gave us notification that, hey, if you're not going to go with this new cost structure, we're going to end our contract with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other discussion on accounting? With that, we move to Finance Administration, 206.
Yep. So as we had discussed briefly when we were going over the accounting department, the accounting work, we are bringing in those services, and we are adding two positions for senior accountants. Now, keep in mind, and if you look at the, for Department 206, if you look at the salary and wages, you see an increase from this year where we're at 402 to we're going up to about 488, 489. Even though we're adding two positions, the net increase is less than the cost of those two positions because we've had some positions that had been on the finance administration's budget, but that had not been operationally within the department. So at the end of the day, we're really adding a net one position. We had a senior financial analyst position that has been previously currently being utilized by our soon-to-be expected to be the grant director. So that position is not going to be in the finance administration's budget, that senior financial analyst position going forward. We're essentially replacing that with, again, one of the senior accountant positions. Additionally, if you look at the kind of the year-to-date results, you'll see we're below on the salaries category. That's due to some of the vacancies that we've had, namely in the purchasing position. That position has been vacant for much of this fiscal year. We are looking to fill that position, and we're really looking towards next fiscal year so that we can have all of our positions staffed, that we have the adequate resources that we need in order to really fulfill our function and our mission as a department. Because we have been for really the year and a half that I've been here, we've never gotten to really what I would consider to be full capacity. So, in looking at that salaries category, we're adding again. We're going to propose two senior accountants along with a grant accountant. We have the finance director, and then we have the positions that are already in our department in the area of purchasing and in the area of accounts payable / accounts receivables.
President Pro Tem Carrington.
Yes, thank you, President McGinnis. Now, what is your contingency plan just in case this plan doesn't go the way you expect it to go?
So, in terms of the in-house service,
definitely in terms of you guys. Previously, you just stated that you was unable to fill those positions prior in this calendar year. So,
I would say in this.
What are things you will do differently to make sure that you're able to get people in?
Yeah.
As we move into this next.
Sure. So I would say the purchasing position had been vacant for much of the fiscal year. which obviously was with the prior administration. Some of that was just due to how the role had been utilized. There were two situations where people were brought in. We're taking a different approach this time, and I'm confident that we should be able to identify someone. If not, then we certainly will have to look at contingencies. But I think part of the challenge before was just we weren't, in my opinion, taking the right approach of trying to find a full-time employee that we could bring in-house. We were bringing in people where it was a little bit different type of situation or type of approach that just didn't, I think, meet the needs of the department, and I don't believe it met the needs of the individuals that had been brought in, and that's why those situations were really short-term.
Were they terminated? Were they resigned?
No, it was just in the first instance, it was a mutual understanding. The person really, indicated that it wasn't going to work for them. It was kind of someone who had, I think, a different expectation of the time commitment that it was going to require. And then in the second situation, it was a law firm that towards the end of the prior administration had been engaged, and we just never really got that situation off the ground. And so, so that's kind of my thoughts on that, Council.
I'd like to recognize Councilwoman Melanie Rutherford as present and voting back at 3:18 p.m. Others that wish to have the floor on Finance Administration? Anything further on Finance Administration? Oh, Councilwoman James.
I have a question. These roles, the new roles that, from your org chart that you are going to be looking to fill,
Yes.
have we already started that process?
We have not officially started that process. We have worked on the job descriptions and started kind of investigating, how we can go about the recruitment process. But we do have, for the senior accountant positions, we do have, some in-house candidates. Our expectations that we're going to offer these positions in-house to see if there's interest with our employees. And also, I do want to point out that, currently we have a deputy director. And one of the things with this year's budget is that we're not proposing to keep that deputy director's position with the expectation that that person can take on some of the same responsibilities that they have in a differently titled role of senior accountant.
Could you kind of walk through the finance chart to see, and let us know what positions are currently filled and which are these new positions? Starting with finance director at the top, and then treasurer.
Yep.
We met the treasurer last night.
Yes.
The income tax administrator, is that? Thank you.
Yes. So obviously, the finance director is myself.
Right.
And treasurer, you met Treasurer Prater yesterday, or some of you met her for the first time yesterday. And we will get into more detail with her budget. The deputy treasurer position is currently vacant. We are in the process of looking to fill that role. Treasurer Prater was formerly the deputy treasurer, and then she became the treasurer when that position became vacant last calendar year. Income tax, again, we'll get into that budget, but we do have a income tax administrator, Larry Kosofsky, and we're proposing 2 new positions within that division. So the deputy administrator, the income tax specialist are 2 new positions. The senior accountant is one of the positions that we're looking at here. Payables and receivable manager is a current position that's occupied. That is Janet Peters.
Okay.
Purchasing specialist is a current position that's vacant. The senior financial analyst, that's the position that is currently occupied by Ms. Borngesser, who our expectation is she's going to be moving to the new grants department next fiscal year, and we'll be essentially converting that position to a senior accountant position. And then the last, I believe we got a duplicate here, purchasing specialist. I think I covered that. But then the last is grant accountant, which is a junior accountant position below the senior financial, below the senior accountant positions. And this person will be working in a junior role, their priority focus is going to be on the increased accounting work that we expect with the activity coming out of the new grants department. And we expect that they will also be able to provide some resources to the finance department and the city as a whole from a financial and accounting standpoint.
Where physically are all the finance administration staff located, or will they be located? Will there be any changes?
So great questions. Currently, we have the finance director's office, which has definitely 3 additional workstations. Potentially, you can make a 4th additional workstation there. And then we also have the HR administration office, which has 2 workstations in it, 2 available workstations in it. We are also working on creating additional space at the end of the hallway, which I talked about before, which if we needed to move some staff there, we could.
Other discussion on finance administration? Councilman Rutherford.
I would just like to see more transparency, because sometimes when I look at this, I don't understand certain things. And it's very frustrating to me and the people at home about how money is being spent and how we're doing this, about budgets, about job creation, about how we paying people.
Sure.
And so the frustration that I'm getting from my, not constituents, but the people I know, is how, who, and why are we paying them? Because of the previous administration, we understand there's been problems, but I just want to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So can you explain to me how you came up with the figures for certain positions that you guys are about to post, and why?
So, and I certainly appreciate the tone and the nature of your question, and certainly we definitely want to strive for transparency. I think sometimes because we're dealing in a pretty technical thing, sometimes we don't communicate it in a way that is easily understandable to the people that we're reporting to. So certainly can take your comments to heart and do what we can to improve upon that. In terms of these positions, we certainly have positions that exist like this in other municipalities, and I've been kind of looking at what's been going on. As I mentioned earlier, I think before you got here, Councilwoman, we are in somewhat of a tight labor market, so we want to be realistic in terms of what is going to take to attract and retain talent. And so it's just a combination of the salaries that are out there in other other cities, along with what we think what our projections show we'll need to pay in order to really be able to hire and keep talent.
My other question, which just to follow up if I can.
Sure.
How long would these job postings be up? They're gonna be more than 7 days, right?
Yeah, I would kind of defer to our HR
Okay.
people on that.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, our we certainly want to make them open to where we again can get the best talent. Hopefully we can find folks here in this community, and whatever it takes. But again, I would defer to our HR team on that.
Thank you.
Other discussion on finance administration? Councilman Parker.
One quick question. I noticed that at your training expense, you go from 3,000 to 24,000.
Yes. So I think a couple of things, Councilman. One is, we're expanding the department. Probably about half of the department had been outsourced, or somewhere 30, 40, 50% of the department had been outsourced. So we're bringing in a significant amount of services back in house, and along with we just haven't. I don't think we've been doing the training that we need in order to keep up to speed in terms from a skill standpoint, in terms of the reporting requirements. And so, I certainly think, and this has been really one of the major things of the mayor and deputy mayors that they want to make sure that we're making adequate budget available for training. And so the large increase is directly tied to that.
Other discussion on finance administration? Hearing no further discussion, we move now to treasury administration.
So again, the finance director is here for that.
Please proceed.
So on the treasury, I think I mentioned earlier when we were covering the org chart, we have a 4-member team that's budgeted for currently, and we're proposing to keep that structure in place. We currently have 3 employees there, as we discussed. Treasurer Prater was here. Portia Prater was here yesterday. She leads the treasury team as the treasurer. The deputy treasurer is a position that's vacant. She previously occupied that and then was promoted to treasurer. So we're certainly looking to fill that position. And then we have 2 cashiers that are currently staffing those last 2 positions. So we're, again, proposing to keep that structure in place, and we're working to fill that deputy treasurer's role.
I have not heard any constituent complaints about backlog or, sort of the flow of customer service in the treasurer's office. Have other council colleagues, I've never visually noticed it, or when I've used the treasurer's office to pay anything, it seems as though the volume is
I've gotten a lot of compliments just about the atmosphere and the general approach, that the CSRs are really welcoming and thoughtful.
I have as well, and they actually go above and beyond when I had to pay what I owed before I ran so that could nobody use it against me. You know how they do around here. Yeah. They was like, Mail, this what you owe. And it was very transparent. So I appreciate somebody who doesn't talk at people but talk to people. So they're my girls down there.
Yeah.
No
I
problem.
sort of echo the rest of my colleagues. I haven't had an issue or heard any issues with that particular.
I certainly noticed some Spanish-speaking residents, as making their way there. Do we have adequate Spanish-speaking capacity in the treasurer's office currently?
Currently, we do not have any of those resources that are available. I'm only aware of one resource in another department, unless I'm missing something.
No, Director, you're not missing anything. That is definitely something that we are cognizant about across the city as a whole. We are doing the best that we can to bring more foreign language capability on staff and letting staff know of the individuals who are here who potentially could help when needed. But additionally, that is something that the training dollars could be used for. If individuals wanted to up their skills, they definitely could, take some classes to actually be able to communicate in Spanish or Hmong or any one of the other languages that is commonly spoken in Pontiac other than English.
Other discussion on finance administration? On treasurer. Anything else you'd like to highlight? Councilman Goodman.
I just wanted to inquire about the increase for large postage, large mailing and postage. So that'd be line item 101 253,728.001. Because it seems like there has been nothing actualized in that to date, and we are continuing that line item all the way across into the recommended budget for the year.
So a portion of that, I believe, is going to be incurred with the summer tax billing, which is going to be later this month, and I believe that's the major cost that we incur with that. We use an outside printer and a outside mailer to send that. So those costs, like I say, are upcoming as we prepare. Yesterday, you guys approved the millages, and so Treasurer Prater's in the process of getting those tax bills finalized into the printer, and we'll be getting those over the next couple of weeks.
So to clarify, would you say so there is nothing that would have incurred any cost in that line item to date?
I'm not sure. The winter tax, yeah. So the only other thing would be the winter tax, and that's it just has not been has not been journalized. Oftentimes when we go through the closeout process, we'll have to recategorize some certain costs that have been incurred that have not been journalized. And we usually do that on a monthly basis.
Okay. Next one is the services dash armored car services. So line items 101-253-812-000. I do see that recommended budget item is the recommended budget is lower than what we incurred this year, and also is lower than the projected activity for this current fiscal year. So the only question I have is there a reason why, assuming that with the increase of capacity and staff and likely the increase in transactions that are moving through the city, at least I would visualize it that way. With this increased capacity, why are we reducing
Sure.
the amount that we're using for armored car services?
Yeah. So, so the activity increase won't necessarily translate to more activity. This is directly tied to the Treasury. So the change in services won't necessarily increase that activity as the people come in and pay their property taxes. But the kind of the rationale behind the thinking as it relates to reduction of that budget, currently we're required to do our deposits on a daily basis. I believe that's in the chart. It's either the charter or the ordinance. And so we're just looking, and it's not in the off-peak times. We really just don't have large cash collections. So it's something that we're looking at, and we're probably going to bring a proposal. Obviously, speaking publicly, I don't want to get into our too in-depth into our cash handling, but essentially when we're in our non-peak seasons, it's not really efficient for us to have our armored services coming on an everyday basis. I mean, we just don't have the cash volume that's necessary for that service. And so right now we're required to do that. But at some point I expect, as we look at the department's operations and specifically this division, we may make a proposal. We will be looking to make a proposal for us to have something that we think makes more sense, and we're not, spending money that just is not efficient and effective.
All right. And the final one is I wanted to inquire about the line item 101-257-818-0.015, the assessor cost. Again, I've seen that we've actualized nothing to date so far.
Yeah, so that's something that's it's kind of an annual service that they do, and we usually book that at the end of the fiscal year. It's part of the assessment process that goes on for property taxes, and it's just a one-time payment. I don't believe we haven't actually paid that cost out yet. It's kind of at the back end of the fiscal year, and we generally do that transaction sometime in this month.
Thank you.
Other questions on the treasurer? All right, thank you. Anything further on the assessor? What is is there a time-sensitive contractual engagement with Oakland County Equalization for assessor services?
I'm not sure about there's a contract. I'm just not sure in terms of where we are with that contract. I would have to pull that. I haven't looked at it in some time. I would have to pull that contract and take a look in terms of where we
If you could provide that
are.
to administration so they can share that, just so we have that on our radar. We are now at income tax. Director Carrington?
Okay. So this is our income tax division. As was mentioned yesterday, I think not a lot of people realize that income tax, I always say we have three large or main sources of revenues in the city. Property taxes is the one most people are most familiar with. Income taxes, and then the revenue sharing that we receive from the state. We're one of a relatively small number of communities in the state of Michigan that is able to levy an income tax that goes to both residents and non-residents. And so it's an important function. For a number of years, it's been a one-man operation or one-person operation, essentially. And we're looking to add some additional staff to the income tax team. We certainly believe that is going to be a revenue generating option for us, that some additional staff will help us be able to utilize additional income tax revenue that's going to exceed the cost of these employees. So when we look at the salaries that are being proposed, we're going from a one-person division to a three-person division, again, with the expectation that one person has been focused solely on delinquent income taxes, and by beefing up those resources, we know that there's a lot of uncollected taxes that are out there, both from a corporate and business standpoint as well as with individuals. And so this is something that we have a high level of belief that it's going to be a good move for the city in terms of being able to collect the revenue that's out there and that is owed to the city. From an operational standpoint, we have a contract with an outside company that essentially handles the processing of the returns. We have one of the company's representatives is here on a daily basis. His name is Ryan. He's down on the first floor along with our income tax administrator. So we're looking to continue that structure where we're focused on collection of the income taxes with the in-house staff, and the processing has been handled for a number of years by an outside vendor.
Is the space where the income tax administration functions happen, will it be adequate with additional?
So we certainly, oh, go ahead.
The short answer to that is no. The larger answer to that is there is additional space in the treasurer's office for overflow.
Any further discussion on income tax administration? Legislative Counsel Sharp.
Clarify, probably the extra cost for the postage, is that increased efforts to
Correct.
get that out?
Yes, yeah. So we certainly expect that there's going to be more collection activity, and we wanted to account for just that very point.
Councilman James.
I have a question on the 101-202-818-061 professional services innovation software. It's at $290,000. Could you explain what that is?
So that's the outside vendor that handles the processing of the returns. We have a contract with this company, excuse me, and they handle the actual processing of income tax returns.
Okay.
Councilman Nicholson.
I seem to recall in a finance committee meeting, there was some talk of the process by which things are taken from here to wherever they're sent from, and there was a cost that was incurred to do that. Has that been resolved?
So that has not been completely resolved. We are in the process of working with this vendor to make sure that we are not incurring superfluous costs with them. Additionally, this is a contract that we are watching and looking to see over the course of this year, once we start the new fiscal year, would it make sense for us to continue with them or to bring that service in-house? But we didn't want to change, because of the nature of what we're doing here, we didn't want to change too many items in the process so that we would actually know, hey, did bringing on more people actually allow us to bring in more taxes, yes or no? And then we can look to say, okay, can we further streamline things by bringing the rest of the processing in-house?
Thanks.
Councilman James.
I'd like to know about, have we considered electronic filing for city taxes? Is that something that we?
So my understanding is that electronic filing is currently available, and I don't know.
So there's so Councilwoman, there you can only electronic file to a certain extent with municipalities. So all of the cities that collect income tax don't have that ability, with the exception of the city of Detroit, which specifically has a contract with the state of Michigan to handle their returns.
And one of the things we're also looking at is trying to expand on the ability to process electronic payments. That's one of the things that we do get a lot of questions and comments about, is our ability to process payments electronically. We do have some of that. People can pay online through BSNA for certain types of payments, but currently credit card payments, non-cash or non-check payments do incur a fee. So we're trying to look at what some of the options are for that, to try and increase, the convenience, and we also think that would help lessen the burden on staff. So we're certainly looking at that not only for income tax but for all of our payments that we process.
I guess I don't really understand. Could you explain why we municipalities in particular are not able to file electronically? That's kind of incredible to me.
No, so that
What
is an
it
answer.
about what we are, the information that we are asking for or that's being recorded that would not be able to be transferable electronically?
So that is an answer that I honestly do not have for you. I can look into it. All I know, well, the mayor appears to know.
Well, I'm not sure I know, but I don't know that I would say we're not able to. I think we're legally able to. I think, again, and the deputy mayor may have a different view, but I don't think it's that we're legally prohibited from doing so. I think that any city can legally do it. The city of Detroit has an arrangement with the state by which employers can choose to employers that are not located in the city of Detroit can choose to withhold city of Detroit income tax from employees who work at those employers, where the employers are located outside the city of Detroit, but the employees live in the city of Detroit. And that is relatively new because of legislation that was passed in Lansing, specifically allowing and authorizing employers to voluntarily do that through the state of Michigan. No other city in the state was included in that legislation, despite the efforts of me when I was there, and I think subsequent Democrats in the state legislature, to expand that to include other cities. But I don't think there's anything that prevents the city of Pontiac or any of the other 20-some municipalities in the state from establishing on their own to do it separate from the state of Michigan. So I guess I have a little bit of a different view from the deputy mayor. I don't think it's a function of us not being allowed or able to do it on our own. Now, it may or may not be prohibitively expensive to do that. I think your question's a very good question, and we should look into what it would take to facilitate electronic filing. I don't know. Am I missing anything that you're aware of, Deputy Mayor?
No, I think the mayor hit it perfectly. So the legislation that was passed was specific to help the city of Detroit, and we will look into it further. But from having worked in and with other municipalities that also have income taxes, but do not have the ability or do not allow for electronic filing, is that there is a true cost prohibition for a municipality to do that, which is why the city of Detroit went through the state of Michigan. Okay. But again, the state of Michigan, to the best of my knowledge, has not opened up that pathway to other municipalities.
Okay.
Other discussion on income? Take your hand, Councilwoman Rutherford.
Yeah. Make me understand this if I was a fourth grader. You saying Detroit can get it, but we can't get it? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. And okay, so
I just want to be a little more specific and precise in how we answer that.
Okay.
The city of Detroit is allowed to have
the state of Michigan handle withholding of income tax, city income tax, for residents of the city of Detroit who work at employers located outside of the city of Detroit. That's really specifically what the law allows. I'm not aware of it directly authorizing electronic filing of tax returns. But of course, if they're withholding taxes, if the state is withholding taxes for City of Detroit residents who work outside of the city, that obviously folks can file electronically their taxes with the state of Michigan. And so that's where that interplay comes into effect.
Attorney Sharp, could you give me some more insight so I can understand?
I think the mayor summed it up. I was just gonna say, I can file it electronically, but I've had problems doing that, so I have to send mine in.
Okay, and I'm asking this because I got that part. Thank you so much. But I'm asking because I just want to get clarity because I always like to understand stuff, and sometimes I simply don't understand. So thank you.
Other discussion on income tax administration. So currently is it right to say that there is 2 income tax administration staff or 1?
One. It's
One.
just, we have one income tax administrator, and then we have the outsourced function.
And the outsourced function compensation would show up in professional services, innovative softwares?
Yes.
Okay.
And then we're proposing to add 2 to take the in-house to a total of 3.
So there would be 3, and that's the recommended budget of 194,000 plus. That would cover the 3 income tax administration staff.
Yes.
And would there need to be any reclassification of the one employee that is there presently, or they serve as the income tax administrator? Or will there be a new posting?
No, the plan is to bring in people below the income tax administrator.
And do you want to introduce him to the city council this afternoon? Do you want to bring him up, say hey?
Sure. We can you grab Larry?
Just because my understanding, based on being a taxpayer, he's been here for a minute, right?
Yeah, yep, he has, I believe Larry was here pre-emergency manager, and he can explain to you his background with the city, but yeah, he certainly has been here for some time.
And so the individual that most residents interface with, that is an employee of the innovative software services?
Well, if you're coming in to pay, if you're just coming in to pay your income tax bill, then you would be interacting with Ryan. Larry focuses on delinquent, a lot of his focus is on delinquent taxes, unpaid taxes, businesses that are not doing withholdings. So that's kind of where he is. If you're coming in and say, hey, I need to pay my tax bill, you would first stop with Ryan. As a matter of fact, when you go into the income tax office, the first person you would encounter would be Ryan, and saying, hey, I need to pay my tax bill. And he can pull up that information for you right there, give you the information you need to take to Treasury to make a payment.
Prior to emergency manager, how was income tax? Was it similarly structured? It fell under the finance department, or okay? Other discussion on income tax administration. What's the projected revenue that you're hoping to hit through greater effort with delinquent income tax?
We have a total projection on the income tax for this coming fiscal year of a little more than $17 million, $17.3 million net. We collect, hey Larry, we collect the revenue, and then we offset that by the amount of refunds that the income tax division processes. So that's why we talk about the net. We make 2 projections. One is the actual collections, and the second number is the amount of refunds. To get the net number, and that's where we're working with that net number of a little more than $17.3 million. I do want to point out, when we start talking about, the income tax collections and the refunds, over the last couple of years, we've been trying and working with Larry to make sure we stay in front and on top of some of the impacts that have gone on with the COVID pandemic, because a number of people who previously were, working on within at their employer site are now, not working there, or maybe they didn't work there for a certain amount of time. So we've been trying to make sure we don't miss any of those dynamics, and I think Larry's done a good job of projecting those things out, as well as fortunately we've seen a number of businesses that have come online. Namely, I think the biggest impact in recent months has come from Amazon. We've started to see the income tax benefits from that project as they got ramped up towards the end of last calendar year.
Thank you. Sir, if you're willing to take the microphone, really I just wanted to say hello and thank you for your service to the taxpayers of Pontiac. How long have you been with the city of Pontiac?
I was with the city from 2001 to 2008, and I came back in 2016 and have been here since, so 6.5 years this go-round and almost 7 years the first go-round.
Thank you very much. Well, truly, on behalf of the residents of Pontiac, thank you for your service to the community. What we're doing our budget hearings through the various different entities, and we were at Income Tax Administration, and we were talking of you, and the finance director was speaking highly of your service. But I figured since you might be here, we thought we'd say hello. I'm Mike McGinnis, the City Council President, and if each of the council members can introduce themselves.
I'm William Parker, Council District 5.
Nice to meet you.
Kathleen James, District 4.
Same here. Nice to meet you.
President Pro Tem, District 6, William Carrington.
Nice to meet you.
Councilman McKell Goodman, District 3.
Councilman Brett Nicholson from District 2.
And Councilwoman Melanie Rutherford of District 1, she is with us but just stepped out. So we just want to say on behalf of the Pontiac City Council, thank you for your service to the city of Pontiac, and it's nice to put a face with the name. We know of you and we know your work, but want to give you the opportunity. Do you feel as though this reinforced investment in income tax administration will strengthen the city's position to, sort of administer it stronger?
Well, as I've said, in budgets were being developed, I said, when it comes to property taxes, you have a set of numbers. You know what the valuation of the property is, and you know what the millage rates are, and pretty much that's what you're going to collect. When it comes to income taxes, we don't know what profit or loss is on the business. We do know that we have a consistent revenue stream, but there are those that don't pay, and we have an opportunity to enhance that. I've been here, like I said, about 6.5 years. The people that I have been in touch with, which is approximately about 5,000 that I'm keeping track of, in those 6.5 years, I managed to bring in about $3.5 million back into the city that can be used by you guys for additional services. And with having additional staff, there's only so much I can do, so having additional staff, we can further beef up the collection efforts that have not been as successful as I would like. I mean, $3.5 million, $500,000 a year is not bad, but I could do a lot better. So yes, I would like to do that.
Thank you. Councilman Parker.
I'm just curious, just out of curiosity, do you have a percentage of how many people in Pontiac actually pay income tax?
That's kind of a hard question because we don't tax pension income, we don't tax Social Security income, we don't tax unemployment. So of the people that are living here, there's a lot of folks that have been here a long time and they're retirees and what have you, so we don't tax that, we don't collect that. We used to have a lot of people that we were generating revenue from a very large automotive manufacturer that's pretty much pulled out of town. And we've been gracefully replaced with Amazon and with United Wholesale Mortgage. I just sent an email to them today because they've had a lot of folks that were working remotely, and I'm trying to say what's going on next year. Do we know, am I going to be giving back as much money next year as I did this year? And they're saying, no, the plan is to kind of bring more of their people back on site. So the refunds that we're giving out this year will be reduced next year to them. So As far as how many inside the city of Pontiac, I don't know specifically. We get a file from the state of Michigan that we call state tapes, and there are multiple thousands of people that we pursue. We kind of have an indication there's about $2 million per year that we could be collecting if the information we're getting from the state of Michigan is correct. Some of that information includes unemployment, and some of it includes pension income, so we have to strip that out.
Okay. So this is money, let's get it.
Yes, sir.
This is money that we've left on the table, I presume.
I'm sorry?
And how far back can we go?
Is there a statute of limitations?
Statute of limitations on this?
There are a couple of statutes of limitations. One is if we've made contact with them, there's like a 6-year window from once we make contact. Some people will enter into installment agreements. We're collecting from some people all the way back on 2003 tax returns because they're willing to pay that, and that window keeps, as long as they're making a payment. We got a payment in today from somebody from a long time ago, and that clock keeps ticking. The 6 years keeps moving out as long as they're making payments. When we get the information from the state of Michigan, we have 6 years from that time. So we currently have like a 2019 records that we're waiting to send out. We can collect on that. If we send that out in 2022, we can collect on 2019 tax years to 2028. So that's like a 9-year window. So it's kind of a vague, kind of a flexible window. Generally, the target is 6 years.
Thank you.
But I mean, if
Excellent.
they file a return, we have sent out one effort, we have 6 years from that point in time, unless they've entered into an installment agreement with us.
Other discussion on income tax administration? Thank you very much for your time and your service to the people of Pontiac, and it's a pleasure to formally meet you.
Thank you.
We move now to Capital Improvements Fund. Finance Director Carrington?
Sure. I know there have been some discussions previously about the Capital Improvement Fund. It's our Fund 445. This is a millage-driven item. We also, have instances where it's funded by other sources, but a lot of the revenue, the bulk of the revenue is from the millages, one of which you approved yesterday. This is one of the millages that you approved yesterday. So wanted to present this to you. There are a couple things that I wanted to point out that we have, some activity that has occurred this fiscal year. We're in the process now of identifying exactly how much of that activity that is budgeted for this fiscal year will get completed. And we'll either look to roll that over or just place those monies back into the fund balance as the administration, as we continue working with our departments in identifying capital projects. There will be a need going forward in the future. And we also wanted to review the items that are in the recommended budget. We have a number of items for DPW vehicles that are here in this capital budget. We have the speed bumps that we discussed during the DPW budget that are included here.
That was humps with an H, right?
Speed. I always say speed. What did I say? Speed bumps.
Right.
Humps and bumps. Yeah.
The distinction, I think, being for those watching from home, there are no general members of the public here presently in person. But for those watching from home, the difference generally being that speed bumps are permanent installments formed either out of asphalt or more commonly concrete, and speed humps are plastic or rubber and in part metal installations that can be moved. Is that what you're alluding to, Mr. President?
That's right. So the speed humps pilot that has been discussed, it would be falling into the Capital Improvements Fund?
Yes.
Okay.
And so just wanted to point those out. I know yesterday there was some discussion about the cemetery, and listening to that discussion, wanted to make clear about the point about some of the questions that were raised during that. We presented more of their operational budget because the cemetery fund is subsidized by the general fund. The capital items, those maintenance and repair items, would be brought through the capital improvement fund through this budget, and you see both this year and this current fiscal year and for next fiscal year, you see allocations that are in the budget for the two cemetery properties. And so, again, wanted to just present this to the council and review any questions that may have.
Parker, then Carrington.
Well, yeah, I'm certainly curious, because I know we talked about Ottawa Park yesterday in regards to the road repair, doing the roads. And I'm sure you haven't put that in here yet. And is that going to be an addition or an amendment to this?
So, I know, I believe in discussing with Director Cooley from DPW, I know he talked about like driveway and some of the road repairs for Ottawa Park, and I believe that there is currently $120,000 in the budget. I'm looking at the mayor and deputy mayor. I believe some of that activity is planned between now and the end of fiscal year, is my understanding.
So some of that activity is planned. The complete paving of the roads is not anticipated.
You said not anticipated.
I said not anticipated for the complete paving of the roads.
The change, we'll be having an amendment to this. Talk to that. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I said the complete paving of the roads in Ottawa Park Cemetery is not currently contemplated.
Carrington, then James.
So I haven't been out to Ottawa Park, but what type of roads are they? Like crushed concrete or what kind of pavement?
Well, I haven't been out there either, but my understanding is that a portion near the entrance is paved, and the large majority of it is gravel. Large majority may be overstating it, but the majority is gravel, is what I have understood. There are a couple of options that we've discussed internally. Again, this was even before Ms. Place approaching us. One is keeping the paved portion paved and repaving it. That seems pretty essential from what we've been hearing. Clearly, we need to make a decision about the gravel roads, and there are two options really. One is better maintaining the gravel roads, which is probably the leading option. We do have two gravel roads within our city limits still that residents actually live on. And one of those in particular, frankly, has been neglected, and we're working to remedy that. And the councilwoman from District 1 has been instrumental in helping with that initiative. The other option with Ottawa Park Cemetery would be paving the entirety of the roads. That would be expensive and probably unnecessary if we properly maintain the gravel, which means bringing in a real grading vehicle that would properly smooth that out.
Go ahead. Yes, sir.
In my follow-up question, I see so 120,000 for the 21-23 fiscal year, and do you know exactly how much some of the activity is only less than $3,000? So do you guys know exactly how much activity? I'm sorry. You said projected of 120. So all those projects that's happening in Ottawa is going to actually reach 120 on the projected?
So I don't have that information in front of me. I will have it for you for next week.
Okay. And my last follow-up question, I'm sorry, is that you budgeted $300,000 for Oak Hill. Is that because Oak Hill has been neglected over the years?
Oak Hill has more work that needs to be done to it.
Okay. And that's really what I wanted to understand.
Well, and to put a finer point on that, I think Oak and I don't know all the ins and outs, but I think one of the reasons why Oak Hill has more work that needs to be done is that it's just a much older cemetery. And some of the work there is historic in nature, and it tends to be more expensive to repair and maintain the historic character of places as opposed to those places that don't have that historic sensitivity.
We have
Thank
hands
you.
from James, Parker, and Goodman. What I'm thinking of doing is us going through item by item. And that way we can sort of ask those questions. Are we cool with that? I don't want to upend the speakers list, but I think there might be value in that. So when it comes to what's generated, am I correct in understanding this millage levied is charter authorized? Is that correct?
Yes.
And so is it in the charter, it spells out sort of what computation is permitted, or what's the maximum?
The charter, and I'll confirm this, but I believe the charter spells out the amount of the millage, how much of a millage can be levied, and then in terms of the state law, because right now we are actually assessing at an amount below that due to the Headley rollbacks, but in answering your question, the charter specifically indicates the amount of the millage that we can levy for the capital improvement.
So the people of Pontiac have instituted a charter revision commission where they'll be reviewing, the early 1980s charter.
82.
That there may be merit to contemplating what the charter confines that capital improvements fund, because it seems to be, obviously, if it's kicking out about $1 million, that's what we anticipate through property tax collection through the millage levying. There are a great many needs that our city has when it comes to public works operations, construction of road and bridges, street lighting, police, sheriff, cable, cemetery 1, cemetery 2, all of our city buildings, information technology, and there might be other departments that could be eligible for capital improvement funds. But clearly, what is generated annually is a fraction of what our needs as a community are for capital improvement. So we're obviously looking to federal funding, we're looking to state funding, we're looking to grants. We've got a one-time opportunity here to invest in our capital needs through the American Rescue Plan funds, but on a sort of sustainability sake, if we didn't have that external funding, we would be extremely hard-pressed and have been historically as a community. Would that be fair to say from your finance department sense that the millage generating capital improvements allows for really just a fraction of what our strong time-sensitive needs are?
Correct. Yeah, I think that is very accurate. I mean, I think if we look at the capital needs of the city, they certainly exceed the amount of revenue that this fund generates, that there are a significant amount of capital needs that the city does have that are not being met.
Other discussion on sort of the generation of capital improvement fund, Rutherford, then Carrington?
This is to the administration, because we have a grant department that y'all just created. Do you see, or are you actively pursuing funding for the particular portion?
Can you
Not-
repeat
Sorry,
that?
there was a ill-timed cough that interrupted me hearing the last part of that.
Are we actively pursuing funding to try to make up for the money that we don't actually have? Like, for example, for in the private and public sector, because that's what y'all created the grant department for, to create funding. Are we actively, not just saying it, actively pursuing it?
Yeah, so in some regards, yes. For example, we've been actively pursuing grants for park improvements, for example. We've also been actively pursuing grants for some forms of road improvements. It is difficult and challenging. The grants that we're pursuing for road and transportation improvements are almost always from public sector entities, the state in particular, the federal government. It's very difficult to persuade private donors to contribute to road infrastructure and transportation infrastructure. And it's even harder to persuade really any of these entities, public sector and private sector, to contribute to things like city hall maintenance or parking lot maintenance. That's almost impossible to go after grant dollars for, even from other levels of government. So some of those areas can be very, very challenging. I was thinking a little bit about this yesterday in the context of the cemeteries, because I think that's going to be a very challenging area to go after grant dollars for as well. And I think some of that, when it comes to private donors, a lot of it is what is perceived as glamorous or exciting, but also what's perceived as having a really big impact on residents' quality of life or economic empowerment. But also some of it with private donors is some of this is just, well, that's what a city is supposed to be doing. So why does the city need private donors? Now, when it comes to public sector donors, like state, federal dollars in particular, there are a number of opportunities for transportation and roads. But I think when it comes to things like, our city hall parking lot or city hall or cemeteries, that's really tough.
I got that part. I just wanted to make sure we were actively pursuing because we created a grant department, and one of their jobs should be trying to find the funding for that, because I get that we're not collecting a lot. I just want to see us get more bang for our buck. That's all.
Absolutely. Now, we haven't, just to be clear to anybody who might be watching at home, we are proposing to create the grants department. It has not yet been created, and so it will not be in effect until July 1st. We do have one person currently doing grants work, and she has been actively pursuing these things. So when I talk about everything that has been actively pursuing, it is one person who is not actually in their own department as of yet, because we're proposing the creation of that department starting roughly a month from now on July 1st.
I stand corrected. I thought it was already created. So Ms. Borengesser, just for the folks at home for clarity, because I like clarity, Ms. Borengesser is currently pursuing active grants. And then in July, y'all have a whole department of people we going to pay that's going to go after grants, correct?
That's right, assuming, of course, that council approves that portion of our budget proposal.
Okay, thank you.
For context, when we're talking about what the capital improvements funds generates, it really would only pay for like a complete reconstruction of like 2 short blocks of a road with concrete. So if we really, just to give it to scale, we have perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars worth of road funding needs, and the capital improvement fund ain't it in terms of giving us even a sliver of what we need to make magic happen.
So thank you for pointing that out, Councilman. A large part of what we do currently is when we pursue state and federal grants, the existence of the Capital Improvement Fund largely helps us do that.
Okay.
Because they'll have a 20% match in most cases. Sometimes because of the either the special pot of money that the federal government may put out that year, or because of different distress standings that the city of Pontiac has, we may be able to lower that from 20%, sometimes all the way down to no match at all, but usually no less than a 10% match. For the most part, this is where those matching funds come from. So when you hear us say that we're doing, an $8 million project, or, $1 million project, or a $500,000 project, yes, the vast majority of that is grant funds that we got from the federal or state government, but a large portion of our match came from the Capital Improvement Fund.
Would that be Department 451, Construction, Road and Bridges?
So yeah, any of that. So anytime you see that we are doing some type of road work, when we come to you and we say, this project had a 20% match, it's very likely that that 20% match came from these funds.
Pro Tem Carrington?
No, I'll pass this real quick, and just so those who may be listening to understand, because I know you're gonna ask
can any of the ARPA dollars be used for capital?
No.
For capital improvement, yes. For road construction, I believe the answer to that is no.
So that's right. So it depends on the capital improvement is the short answer. So if we can tie it to things that promote health, and that I would argue includes parks, because parks are a place where people go for outdoor recreation and that promotes health. I would say parks, yes. Maybe if it's non-motorized transportation, the answer is yes for the same reason. But roads, pretty clearly the answer is no. It can be used for underground infrastructure, water and sewer lines, which we have not utilized the capital improvement fund for, at least not in recent years, because that's typically paid for through people's water bills. Although stormwater, just to be clear, is not paid for, and I know this came up the other day, by people's water bills, and is solely the responsibility of the city, unlike water and sanitary sewer lines, which are owned now by the Water Resources Commissioner at the county. So, if it comes to items like the city hall or the parking lot here, the answer is generally no. ARPA dollars cannot be used for that as a general rule.
Any other discussion about the revenue generated before we move to the next line item? So, Councilwoman James.
Where are you at? I don't see revenue generated.
So Department 000, it shows current property taxes, et cetera. That just, the revenue kicked off of the capital improvements fund millage, or the capital improvements millage. That all goes to this fund.
Okay.
So next line, Department 228, information technology. So capital improvements fund is utilized for commuter equipment. Looks like it's pretty constant. Is that the regular sort of cycle or rotation of those that are most in need of departments, or is there a targeted campaign for new infrastructure?
So that is a mixed answer. There is a targeted campaign for retiring computers and bringing new computers into the system, but additionally, the cable department has recently just bought a bunch of new equipment, right? So that was not part of a, hey, every 10 years the cable department buys new stuff. That was, wow, we really have antiquated equipment that needs to be
And that
brought.
came from the capital improvement fund?
A portion of it did.
Well, it came from the cable fund. It came through. You'll notice at the bottom, you see a transfer in, and this is where we get into some of the accounting that we use that may not be the transparency that Councilwoman Rutherford pointed out. At the bottom, you see Department 966. You see a transfer in from Fund 231. That is the cable fund. So to some extent, we try and have our capital spending done in this fund. In this instance, we brought in $750,000. $750,000 in from the cable fund to cover the expenditures for the cable project that the deputy mayor was alluding to. So, in essence, any of those costs are not being directly borne by the capital improvement fund. We're bringing in the money from the cable fund to cover those costs. Anything that goes unspent would then be returned back to the cable fund.
So I don't mean to bounce around, but since you've raised it, Department 291 cable, that $39,305, is that where some of those computer items will be booked? Or
It's where the studio equipment that's being purchased, and this $39,000 is the initial stages of that. It's where that equipment is being purchased through and where that activity will be reflected, or it has been and will continue to be reflected against that $750,000 that had been budgeted.
So while there may be spikes for specific needs, but generally speaking, it's the replacement of retiring computers. Other information technology discussion, Councilwoman James?
No, I wanted to go back.
Okay.
So when you get done with that, I'd like to go back because wasn't clear exactly where you were.
Okay. In terms of the revenue from current property tax?
Yeah,
So-
the
Yes, you have
question I
floor.
had was in regards to investment income. There was a question that came up the last time that we were discussing this, was that the council had the authority to set, we were saying that the investments were, the city could only use very conservative kinds of investments, and there was a limit on what kind of investments that we could do. And I believe uh, uh, Attorney Sharp made some comments about that the council had some leeway in terms of determining what investments the city could use. Is there like an ordinance, I believe? talked
We
about?
refer to it as an investment policy.
An investment policy.
Councilwoman, yes.
Because I was looking at it showing 25,000, but I noticed that there's nothing in the mayor's current budget
And so,
for investment income.
and you'll see a negative number in the activity. That's something that we're going to be working with the auditors. One of our investments is currently with a pooled investment through Oakland County. And with the decline in some stock market, or with the decline, I shouldn't say stock market because these assets aren't in the stock market, but with the decline in some of the capital markets, that pooled investment, the value of those pooled investments has decreased. Generally, we think about interest income as that we've got X millions of dollars and we're just investing it in collecting interest. The way that this pooled investment fund reports is a little bit different. And so we got to work with our auditors to see exactly how we should reflect this, because showing negative interest to me is not really an accurate way of reporting it. Again, the transparency, accuracy, goals that we're trying to achieve. And so that's somewhat of a little bit different wrinkle here because interest rates have been so low. A lot of the investment that we generate are based on somewhat fixed interest rates, and as those assets decline, the reporting from the pooled investment account may show an actual decline in the underlying assets, even though they're still generating what we would consider to be income. So we're trying to work through that. We will be working through that reporting as we go through the audit process.
Legislative Council Sharp, anything you'd like to offer?
No, I was just going to provide something that I discovered in researching. I think what Councilwoman James was referring to was a discussion in the Finance Subcommittee about council creating the policy in terms
The
of
investment policy,
Yeah.
yes.
And so I found something, I don't think it has been changed since the emergency manager, that talks about, established the investment
Yes.
policy.
Okay, so you have that to share
do.
with council?
Yes.
All right, very good.
So, and just on that point that Attorney Sharp pointed out, so there are really two guiding things here. One is the state law, which sets kind of the limits on what we can invest in, and then the investment policy further, puts some parameters on that, namely the percentages of the types of investments that we can
So
get into.
why is it being booked in capital improvements fund? Why are you reflecting it there versus?
So
the other?
it's just when we look at the city has a sum of cash, and we can attribute a certain percentage of cash to each of these respective funds. And so the percentage of the cash of the city and the percentage of the investments of the city that are attributable to this fund, we then do a corresponding distribution of any income that we generate. So that it's in general fund. You'll see it in all the funds that have a cash and investment balance.
Councilwoman James?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, is this something, the investment policy, is that something to our Councilman Nicholson, is that something the finance committee could take on as something that we need to take a look at?
Yeah, we actually asked for it as a follow-up item from our last subcommittee meeting, so it'll come to this subcommittee meeting, and then we'll talk about whether or not, with leadership too, to see if that's something that we want to discuss full council and potentially make changes or suggestions to.
Any further discussion in terms of the revenue for the capital improvement fund? Anything further on information technology? Building maintenance, City Hall lot repairs, $800,000 was budgeted currently. None has, no activity is booked on that. Nothing is included for City Hall lot repairs going forward. Is it still the plan to do a resealing for the lot? And should we see that this fiscal year? What's the scoop?
So the scoop is at our next facilities committee, we'll go more in depth on, overall plans, thoughts about City Hall. But until we have a full comprehensive study of all of the properties that are owned by the city, we are, as was stated before, we are making the necessary improvements to get us to a point of relative safety and it is okay to use, as opposed to making the full 100%, let's spend almost $1 million in the parking lot to bring the parking lot up to a best case scenario.
Legislative Council Sharp, was there anything from the prior city council's perspective? Was the City Hall lot repairs the prior administration's initiative? Was it a shared desire? So
Yeah.
there was mutually understood
Yeah.
that would be accomplished in the fiscal year that we are in the
Yeah.
twilight hours of. Would this be where, or would it be down below for police and sheriff for building additions and improvements? Some of the sidewalk and the entrance to the substation is obliterated. It's like dust.
And so that is that is a great example of a health safety issue that we have said has to be fixed now. So that has been contracted out to be done.
Okay, so that may be booked, depending on how the dollars and timing works out. That may be booked this fiscal year, it may not.
Correct.
Okay, Councilwoman James?
Would those dollars, should they be in this capital improvement fund, or are they in the DPW fund now? If you're saying that this is already,
Are you making provisions
that we're
for the coming
planning to
fiscal
do it, should it be in this fund, or should it be in the DPW budget?
I'm not certain if it is in the capital improvements budget. I think it isn't coming out of the capital improvement fund for the fiscal year that we are currently in. Although, to your point, it could come out of DPW's funds because, to Councilwoman Rutherford's point and to the example that Director Carrington gave, you can have intertransfers of funds that make it sometimes hard to follow the money. But the succinct answer is, coming out of this current fiscal year, we will pay for the sidewalk improvement in front of the sheriff's understation.
Councilwoman
I
James?
just want to, just a comment. This is my first, year being a council person. It's confusing working through the budget because when I see what appears to be a line item and I'm following it through, my assumption is that here with the building maintenance, that $800,000 was budgeted for the building maintenance for Department 265. 31,956 was used in this 2021-22 timeframe. And the projected 2020 is still the $800,000. There's nothing, I'm thinking that these are monies that are set aside for this particular line item. But apparently, that really is not how,
So,
if it's budgeted, it's something, if there's a line item, I guess what I'm saying is there's a plan for it to be done. And I'm confused as to
So, and I mean, your point
really
is a very valid one. So I think part of the response, I think there's a couple of things. One is to keep in mind that, during the fiscal year, you know, really, we here when we start talking about some of these capital projects, they're seasonally dependent. If we start talking about outside things, so if things weren't started by a certain time last year, they kind of run into a situation where they have to get done later in the fiscal year. We also, as obviously as you know, we went through a change in administration and change in elected leadership. So some of the projects that were initially approved by the council didn't get online with the last administration, and the current administration is certainly, coming with certain priorities and reviewing these things. And then the last point I would make is that, we also have a timing effect. So some of these projects, some of the activity, that is not reflected here could be going on right now. Will be billed for it later later this month. We have until the end of August. We keep our fiscal year books open until the 31st of August to book any activity that goes towards the current fiscal year that's ending June 30. So if there's some work that occurs before June 30th, we have until August 31st to get billed and make that payment, and we can still apply it. So it's a combination of those things. The approach that I did want to take is to keep these projects on the current books for this current fiscal year, so that to whatever extent these projects are not completed or started or finished in this fiscal year, we would have funding available to roll those dollars over. And keep in mind that anything that doesn't get spent in this fiscal year does go back into the fund balance and gives the administration and the council the opportunity to reappropriate those funds.
Rutherford, Goodman, Carrington, Sharp.
Where do I begin? Y'all got to make this more clearer, because it can get confusing, and I'm getting frustrated because if I don't know a thing, I can't explain a thing, and I don't want to be no liar, okay? And if ain't nobody else gonna say it, I am. Y'all got to do better. Like I literally don't even know what y'all talking about, like right now. And I'm trying to understand. And I studied it. I got my book. I highlighted it. Y'all got to do better, man. Because if y'all talking about and my frustration is because if I don't say it, y'all not gonna improve on it. Y'all got to do better about explaining this stuff. Because if you're spending money that we don't understand what you're spending it for, if you have stuff that's lying to get stuff paid for, we got to make sure that we're doing it. Because at the end of the day, it ain't going to be you. Who they going to say something to? It's going to be us. So, call a spade, call it what. Y'all got to do better.
So,
I'll
so-
add you to the speakers list.
Come on, man. Go ahead.
Councilman Goodman.
So I think this has been brought up multiple times, including during this meeting. But to ask a specific question, when it comes to the projected activities, not only for this account and for the ones following, in your understanding as State Science Director, do you perceive any of these accounts, especially Department 256, 273, 291, and 301, all on the same sheet?
I'm sorry. Give me those numbers again.
So it'd be still in the capital funds. It would be Department 265, so building maintenance.
Yep.
273, Cemetery Ottawa Park. 291, cable, and 301, police and sheriff. How many of those, in your best understanding, will even remotely get close to the projected activity between now and when we will be closing the door on paying for those things?
August 31st.
Yep.
Right.
So I expect that the Ottawa Park, I believe those funds are expected to get expensed, a large, if not all, a large part of those. I believe that with the cable, where we are currently, we had allocated $750,000. I believe that was for equipment and some worked, and I'm looking at Attorney Sharp, for work for,
So for the sake of time, I don't really need the necessary detail. The question I'm specifically asking is, to your best knowledge, how many of these fund accounts will get close to the projected expenditure activity, showing what we have here by August 31st?
yeah, I would say, maybe 3 or 4 of them will get there. I mean, some of that's going to depend upon where the DPW, who's overseeing a number of these, where we end up. Again, I think the cable, I think we're going to get through the majority of what needs to be spent on that. We're not going to be spending, the current project scope does not have $750,000. So we're going to be somewhere south of 750 for the entire project, but we're going to get through most of what the the current scope of that project
So
is.
the question I'm also asking is not even about completing the project. The specific question that I'm asking is, how many of these? Yes, Deputy Mayor Stevens.
So I think I can answer that question for you. If we look at building maintenance, City Hall lot repairs, $800,000. We're not going to spend anywhere near $800,000 on City Hall lot repairs.
Are you going to spend anything?
We will spend something, yes. But again, the $800,000 was for a complete rebuilding of the parking lot.
So also for you, for the sake of the question that I'm asking, it's not even about the completion necessarily of the project. The question I'm asking is, how many of these projected funds will actually get close to the projected activity for us to have not updated the projected activity at any point in time throughout this year? So like in the case of, let's see, information technology, those numbers seem rather straightforward and accurate all across the board. But yet when we move to building maintenance, and I get that we haven't spent that money for many different obvious reasons, in a few of these accounts, I'm looking at it and seeing that there is almost no way to really actualize that large amount of money. And it's showing up in not only in this one, but in multiple cases where information's not accurately being updated for us to be able to read to multiple different points that have been made today and in previous meetings. Is that this information is becoming much more difficult because it's seeming that in some ways before it gets to us, it's not being fully gone over to make sure that it is being, well, one, that it is not only just accurate in the sense of it's not wrong, but accurate in the sense of this is how it will be best read to the people up here.
So going back to your simple question, there are 4 categories. In 2 of those categories, I believe that we will largely have expensed what's there. In the other 2 categories, I believe that we largely will be moving that money back to fund balance. To go further to your question, some of the frustration that you have is the way that the system is set up to automatically make projections. We can definitely enhance that and go in and make manual adjustments to that in the future.
Yes, and it's not because I want to create unnecessary work, but very much, and no offense to you, it is your job. And when you bring these things to us, to everyone else's point, it is extremely difficult to go over these things because we've gone now multiple situations where we've gone line item by line item and found discrepancies that make our jobs much harder. And we've been doing this now for multiple weeks. And whether it be the mindset of, okay, well, it's already messed up and we'll just keep making corrections as we go forward, or, hey, we recognize that we haven't been doing this, let's try to, get some of the future meetings more accurately representative. But now, again, we're going into what is, I believe, the 3rd week of budget meeting. Correct me if I'm wrong. And we're still coming back to the same moment of it's very difficult to do this and go over all this information and accurately address the concerns that we have, understand the concerns, understand what's being told to us. And again, we keep coming back day in, day out, and there are a lot of things that just aren't adding up or aren't being explained in a way that is actually useful to the people on this dais who do not have the same level of experience as Councilman Nicholson or the department itself.
Sure.
And so we have many people on the speakers list. I want to point out we've got Carrington, then Sharp, then Stevens, then Rutherford, and just raise your hand if you want to be in, oh, Carrington's good. But I want to ask a follow-up question to that. Fast forward, we have survived another year, and it's June 2023. It's the end of this fiscal year. If we are looking at projected activity, and it shows this kind of dormant nature, then we will be extremely frustrated because it will have perverted the entire budget process. The budget is about planning what we want to do as a municipality for the residents. And we want to, of course, make changes throughout the year when reality allows us to have more data. But if we have appropriated $800,000 or $400,000 or $750,000 to various projects, and we have flatline for 11 to 12 months, there will be bigger issues. And I anticipate that the executive administration understands that fully. We realize that this is a transition from a previous administration to a new administration, a previous council to a new council, and of course a lot of staff changes that happen departmentally as well, or staff absences. But it will be very problematic if throughout the course of the year it's not been thoroughly conveyed, amended, or projected when things aren't materializing because of external factors, which there always will be. Every fiscal year will have external factors, but these are substantial deviations. And if it's a matter of that is no longer a priority for the new administration or a different approach is desired, then let's just say so, or let's just project accordingly. Because if we are at this point this time next year, then something is really broken or continues to be broken. Next on the speakers list, since Carrington has passed, is Sharp, then Rutherford, Sharp, then Stevens, then Rutherford, then Grimo.
I think, Council President, you may have summed up what I was going to mention. I think that the frustration is coming in, I'll just pick out the two, which are the city hall lot repairs for the $800,000 and just use the cable with the $750,000. The reason I bring those two up is because, one, we know, based off of what the finance director has said and other things that have been said, in terms of the prior council with the cable, booked $750,000. That was because other improvements were supposed to be made to this chambers, which is not going to happen. But we know that's not going to happen. So therefore, we know that $750,000 is not going to be spent. So that could have been modified. I think that's where your confusion is coming in, because you know that $750,000 is not going to be spent. The lot repairs, the $800,000. I heard the administration mention some time ago that they were not going to do those entire all of those improvements. So we know that $800,000 is not going to be spent. So therefore, that number should be modified. So with that, I think the council's kind of getting frustrated with looking at these numbers and saying, hey, we already know that by the end of the fiscal year, we're not going to spend this money. So why isn't the number modified? I get that some of these projected projects still have time, and you can still get them done by July, but a lot of them we know are not going to happen. So why isn't that number changed?
Deputy Mayor Stevens?
So what I was going to say has already been covered, and just saying, you know, going over Councilman Goodman's question.
Got it. Councilman Rutherford?
Okay. Let me try to be polite. In the future, when we do these things, it needs to be so relatable that anybody can read it. I understand people have their degrees in accounting. I understand some of y'all some lawyers. Some of y'all went to law school. But I call a spade a spade. It is disappointing to the public. It is disappointing to me as a council person that there are this many discrepancies. And this is not going to be, if no one else is going to say it, on us. It's going to be on y'all, because this is y'all's job. I'm saying it plainly because that's not what I originally wanted to say, but I'm being polite, okay? This can't keep happening. Because every time somebody asks me a question about money, I want to be able to say, here it is right here. Instead of saying, well, let me look through page 175, and then let me go to line, this is too much. And it feels as though it ain't right. And when something don't feel right, I'm gonna say it ain't right. This ain't right. And I'm beating a dead horse because if I don't say it, it's gonna bother me every time I look at this budget. Yeah, please, dog. Come on, man. Man.
Mayor Grimal's next on the speaker's list, then Deputy Mayor Stevens.
Well, so I'm hearing a few different things. One of which I strongly agree with, which is that the actuals, in terms of the actual activity to date, needs to be updated in a timely way to reflect actual activity to date. And as I said, I strongly agree with that. We've conveyed that previously, publicly and privately, to the department, and I fully share your frustration with the fact that that's not happening. It's completely unacceptable.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
So I strongly agree with that, number one. Number two, I've heard that when there are large amounts that are budgeted, maybe any amounts that are budgeted, that are not being spent because of a policy decision by the executive branch, that needs to be clearly communicated to council. I also agree with that. I've tried to do that, which is why I shared my view on the parking lot, and I think there are ways to make meaningful improvements to the parking lot that are not completely repaving it, but rather doing sealing and some superficial coating of the parking lot and restriping of the parking lot that is far less expensive, but will accomplish the goal of addressing the major concerns that folks have. And again, I've tried to communicate that in the past, as Ms. Sharp mentioned. The third item I'm hearing is trying to convey the information in a more user-friendly way, which we're open to doing as well. And I think there are a number of opportunities to do that. And I think Clerk Doyle's budget for his department is a way of doing that in big picture ways, at least. I do just want to be clear, though, that the very nature of and we throw this word around maybe loosely, but the very nature of a line item budget is such that the details of it will always be conveyed in essentially this format. So while there are ways to have bells and whistles that for major expenditure items have easier to follow graphics and bar graphs and things like that, and I think that is important and appropriate, when it comes to the specifics and the details, there really is not going to be a more user-friendly way to delineate that information than what you see in front of you.
Deputy Mayor Stevens.
Thank you, Council President. The only other thing that I would like to add is, or things I guess I should say that I would like to add are, one, so the budget was submitted, and administration made a conscious decision not to make changes to the individual budgets until we got to that point in the budgeting process. Specifically, we made that decision to attempt to reduce any type of confusion. Hey, you gave me this was what was in my budget book, but now you've given me this different sheet. So the idea was, we've given you what was in the book. We're going to go through this process, and then we have 2 days, at which point in time, all of the notes that we've taken will be reflected in the new sheets that we give you. The second thing that I will say, which reiterates what the mayor has said and what has already been said, is that we will be more timely in going through and making updates, and we can make manual updates to take out the automatic projection that the system does as far as how much money is going to be spent by when. And then I will say that as far as the year-to-date budget goes, we have tried to be somewhat timely in coming to the council and asking for budget amendments to get our line items in alignment with what we knew was actually being spent. So when we knew that a line item was going to be short, we came and said, hey, this line item is going to be short and we need to put money in it. And in one instance, we even said this line item is going to be short, and in order to put money in it, we're going to take it from these line items which we know are going to be overfunded for this year. And so we can do that more frequently. We can do it less frequently. One of the things that we have actually discussed was, do we just want to have a quarterly time when we come and do budget amendments? So every 3 months we do it, or do we want to do it every 2 months, or do we want to continue to do it on a, hey, we know we need a budget amendment, let's just do it now basis, right? These are all items that we need to determine as a group, how do you best want to handle them?
Councilman Goodman, then Councilman Nicholson.
So I think the thing that needs to be a little bit understood here is also, like, this is not a, per se, a, we need you to immediately course correct, you know, with everything that we do for the next week or so. But I think a lot of this is also a moment that a lot of us are airing out grievances, because we are literally going through the process at the moment and realizing the areas in which are creating problems. And again, to jump back to a couple points that I've made, specifically with, like, the building maintenance fund, an example of where things could have been improved just for our own sake is we recognize that this budget was finalized, remind me what day again, back in
May.
So I would assume so that by May 1st we had an understanding that we would not spend $800,000 in city lot repairs. So by that point we had already, like, as to Attorney Sharp's point, realized that would not be spent. So when going through this budget, going through that process, I assume that the administration, having made the decision, and the finance director would be aware this would not be spent. Therefore, in this budget, we can you know, say, well, one, it very easily projected activity. We're definitely not going to spend $800,000. So what is the more realistic projected activity? And again, I can say, you know, with some outside looking in eyes, that we knew that months ago that we wouldn't spend $800,000. So that's the point that I'm getting at, is very much like we are beginning to notice all these areas in which we recognize that things have fallen through the cracks. And so for us recognizing those things, it also then brings to the front of the mind, what things are we not noticing that are happening that are not necessarily the most conducive to the system? So I think that's the thing to just be noticed, is that, like, we are also pointing these out for, as pointed out, future reference, because we don't want to be in the same spot next year, because in the same spot next year there will be some of us on this dais who are very kind that won't be, and some of us who are a bit more straightforward who are probably going to have a much worse time.
Councilman Nicholson.
So yeah, I want to build on that. I think the projected activity category could be a real opportunity. You know, as we've talked about our budgeting process and how we move forward and how we want to refine the process, I think that is the category that is your forecasting. That's the plan, and the plan, you know, was the budget, but then the plan changes, and that's our forecasting category. So to me, that if I would have seen those changes, it wouldn't have shocked me, and I think that's maybe something that has been thoughtful throughout the process. Is we don't want to, like, bring something to the council where they say, wait a minute, what are they doing? You know, I think then that's where the problem is. You can't have a forecasting category without a narrative. And that's what I talked about before, is when any of those items, and maybe set a threshold for yourself of saying, you know, we need to mention in the narrative any item that is more than whatever is going to be the shock value for us. So I think that is one part. The other part that I have a problem with, that I continue to go back to, is that those projected activities, on some of the accounts that we see, they're through 4:30, and on some of the accounts they're through 6:30. So 6:30 makes no sense to me, because that should just be the same thing as the next category. It's essentially having two categories, but then sometimes they have different numbers in them. So I appreciate the process. I feel probably more comfortable than most because I've had the experience of being able to handle these documents on a monthly basis. But the inconsistencies in the documents, and then also I think there's some information that's shared with us that are for the purpose of the system, and we don't know all of the details behind where those numbers are pulled from, so they don't make sense to us, and they wouldn't make sense to us. And I think they actually, if I were a member of the public and I saw, just the bottom of this form with no experience looking at it, these numbers are not just what's on this page. So the beginning fund balance, end fund balance, we've talked about that before, that it doesn't make sense when you're just looking at this one piece of paper floated out and was found on the street. Somebody would go, these numbers don't match. Here, there's something going on here. Whereas what we know is those numbers are pulled from multiple areas of the system, multiple accounts, multiple, years back. So I think that limiting some of that, what we need to know, of course, are the things in the line on a budget that we're required to know. What is the account, the number, the account name, the previous budget, and is amended as always. The activity through whatever we actually have closed, which is, I think we all have a level of comfort in saying, we know you're not going to have last month's numbers closed before 30 days even, right? In Finance Committee, we look back, right now, I don't know, am I outside? It's June, right? So we're looking at April. So we know, I wouldn't have been shocked to see numbers through the end of April, as we've seen in some of them. But then when I don't want to be too, say, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to get it done in 15 days. I would rather have really what we know is going to be booked and actually done. And then you've got your projected activity, which is, our forecast, our best guess based on all the information we have. And that is a changing thing. And I think we get so nervous about having that forecasting field because if it's $10,000 off council, we're not going to hold. The forecast is where we're at, what has changed, what's the ideas, and what we might see moving forward. We know that's not the amended budget. The amended budget was but we know if there's a forecasted field, there's going to be an amendment coming to us. There's going to be a budget change. So, I think using I get that a lot of times we look at this and we're like, oh my gosh, this is a lot. But if we were able to kind of categorize these fields a bit to say we understand how they're being used and what our expectation is, and then if there's a narrative around things that are very large, I think that it's doable. It's doable to use this format and have people be able to digest it.
I've got to remember where I am on the speakers list.
Sorry.
No, let's hit Council Sharp.
Mine is just going to be something about going forward. So going forward, just as a suggestion, maybe council and administration may need to just kind of agree on, in terms of the proposed changes, what council may like to see so that it won't cause any further confusion, like what format that should be in those proposed changes.
And I want to share that the administration did ask council leadership what format should we go, and we went with, okay, what's been the existing format. So that's something that council leadership can advocate for as we've grown from this process and have a strong sense of what works for council deliberations and then public digestion as well. Will the expansion on the finance department staffing strengthen the budget process going forward? So you can make those modifications or innovate with ways in which you want to manage the city's finances as the year progresses, then also with the next year's fiscal budget.
Certainly. Both the expansion and I think, just as importantly is the existing staff, both in our HR division and within the finance administration, we've had a number of vacancies throughout the fiscal year that's requiring, individuals to take on responsibilities outside of their regular scope. And so, that's not to try and lodge a complaint. It's just, in answering your question, I think it's not just bringing in additional resources, new resources, but us getting some staff positions filled so that people who are currently having to fill in different roles, dual roles in some cases, triple roles, can then get back to some of their core responsibilities.
For capital improvements fund, I'd like us to land the plane a bit, but $3,175,000 is what was requested by the department for public works operations vehicles. 500,000 is now what's recommended by the mayor for the capital improvement fund. Is the
I don't think they're with us yet.
Is the balance of the vehicles for public works operations, are those wholly handled by American Rescue Plan funds in terms of mowers and other things? Or is there still a gap where not all requested vehicles are able to be funded this fiscal year?
When you say funded this fiscal year, I think they can all be funded the coming fiscal year.
Yeah, apologies, this coming fiscal year.
Um,
Proposed fiscal
but
budget.
not all of those funds can come from ARP dollars. So, but in terms of the required expenditures to hire or to buy the lawnmower equipment, that can come from ARP dollars because that's used primarily, if not exclusively, in parks. When it comes to the road maintenance vehicles for plowing and salting, that can also be funded out of this coming fiscal year's budget, but not from ARP dollars.
So your understanding is that all of the requested departmental vehicle needs are able to be met with a combination of this funding and American Rescue Plan, or is there still a shortfall?
It's my understanding
requests not able to be met.
It's my understanding that in terms of the DPW vehicle and equipment requests, they can all be met this coming fiscal year through a combination of ARP funding and funding from other funds. But Deputy Mayor Stevens and Mr. Carrington, is that your understanding as well?
Thank you. Other questions on the capital improvement fund? Capital improvement fund. Councilman Goodman.
Actually, never mind. Nope.
Has it been itemized what the $300,000 for Oak Hill Cemetery will represent, or is that more of a reservoir that you will blow through, and I say that with all love, but blaze through, it will be fully utilized, but the project priorities are still being ascribed? I know that you have meetings upcoming. What's the vision for the 300,000? Is it clearly itemized, or is that is as much as you are able to earmark, and that the priority projects will still be worked through in the coming weeks and months?
So the 300,000 is in this current fiscal year that we're in that has a month left.
No, I'm talking Oak Hill Cemetery. Cemetery Oak Hill, Department 276.
Oh, okay. I thought you
We
were
got-
down to construction
Yep,
and
we got
bridges.
crickets for the current fiscal year, but requested was 300,000, and what's now in your recommended budget is, or proposed budget is $300,000, which I am very pleased. I think that the people of Pontiac will be pleased with that as well. And there's no wrong answer. I was just curious if you've already kind of fully fleshed out what that work will show.
The answer to that is that it is not fully fleshed out. There is more than $300,000 worth of work that if you aggregate it. But that is what we committed to being able to do in the cemetery in the coming fiscal year.
Understood. Other discussion on capital improvement? Councilwoman James.
Yes, on item 448, street lighting, the amended budget was 213,000, but the mayor's recommended budget is 100,000. And District 4 has had horrendous problems with street lighting. Right now, we have 20 street lights out between Baldwin Avenue and Walton Boulevard, between Baldwin and Silver Lake Road, that have been out for, this is the second time, and each outage is anywhere from 2 weeks to a month. So and I've gotten a lot of calls about lighting, and I'm particularly concerned because they go out again. The reliability in the systems is very, very poor. Not sure what is going on yet, but I would think that we would not want to reduce. I understand this is streetlight improvements, but it bothers me to see a reduction from last year's budget, and I'm kind of wondering why is that?
All right. So, the short answer to your question is actually slightly long to create clarity. When you say that you're not sure why the lights keep going out, the answer to that is the infrastructure of the lighting system. So the infrastructure itself is so old that even when we replace the bulbs, the ballast, and the other things, quite frequently those are not the cause; they are the symptom. And so it is going to be more than the 213,000, more than 100,000 that we have budgeted to say, hey, we can go in and we can make some temporary repairs. This goes back to needing to do a larger study to understand, hey, where are the wires so old that infrastructure itself needs to be replaced. And as we are going through and making repairs and changing these, we have been documenting that and putting together an overall plan for, how are we going to do this? But we've had we had 10 years of emergency management where there was just complete deferred maintenance. And on top of deferred maintenance, there was deferred record keeping. So we don't even necessarily have good records from that time period to say, hey, we know this is a problem and we didn't fix it. It just problems compounded and compounded. And so we have been taking the standpoint, again, going back to the idea of the parking lot, of saying, what are the things that have to be done right now to at least get us to a point where it is usable so that we can come back and be more strategic about saying, do we really want to spend this much money on this activity? Or do we instead want to say, hey, instead of just replacing what's there, here's a different idea completely, but we needed the time to actually be able to make those assessments.
Councilwoman James?
Well, I hear what you're saying, Deputy Mayor. I still, though, feel that looking at this, the 213 that was budgeted, of that, only 76 was actually spent that we know of. And now we've reduced that budget to 100,000. So I still think if we may not know all of the specifics, we may not have the complete lighting assessment done. We do have an outside contractor. We did renew their contract for the second time. So in one of the comments that was made was that it's good, we have a contractor who is more familiar with our systems than anyone else. So we do have someone who's been working in the city a number of years now. And I would think that we would allocate enough, that the whole planning process is to allocate funds to be able to use to relieve some of these issues. And I don't see the allocation, the mayor's recommended budget for 22-23 being less than what the recommended budget would be for this current year. That's my concern.
Pro Tem Carrington?
Just a quick question, and I know we're not looking at the DPW budget right now, so what in a line item for street lighting in the DPW budget? 'Cause I know this is capital improvement.
Yeah, this is
fund.
just for
Yes.
improvements.
Yep. So there is a line item in general fund, and that's one of the points that I think we'll need to follow up. just in terms of repairs versus improvements. I know a lot of the improvement is focused on upgrades to LEDs. And so I believe that this may not necessarily reflect 100% the concern that the Councilwoman James is expressing, because I think hers, and I don't completely understand the technical aspect of it, but I believe your concern may fall into the category of repairs, which may be a general fund item, as opposed to, my understanding is that this capital fund is focused on those LED upgrades that the city has been doing, but that's something that I would need to clarify with Director Cooley.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, which is I don't know the answer, but it would be helpful to have Director Cooley here. Is he in the building? Because we built out the mayor's recommended budget, in this case, based on the department's recommended budget. And it would be insightful to hear his take on this because he really has the technical know-how. I don't think any of us in this room really have that technical know-how.
Or if he wants to provide an answer, by text, that's all right as well. We can put a pin in it temporarily just for the sake of time, but if you get an answer or if he's in the building, we'll welcome that. Are there any other capital improvement fund questions that we can pose at this time? We can revisit that. We're now at human resources. Director Carrington, anything you'd like to expand upon for us?
So in terms of the human resources current division and soon to be department, it's a 2-member team that is being proposed. Just when we comprised this budget, it was prior to the the new HR person coming aboard, and so we have shared this current budget with her, and she's obviously working to get more familiar with the city's operations. But in short, we have two people that are funded through the salary and wages within this category, and the remainder of the budget is largely some of the operational needs, administrative needs of the department that those 2 employees will need.
Councilman Parker?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have really one question. Based on all the people that you say you're adding to or bringing in-house, will 2 people be enough to be able to handle the volume that you're expecting to be added to the city personnel?
We do believe so. We have actually spoken with the first with the consultant and then with the HR manager director that has been hired, and we do believe that based on the type of work that needs to be done, that 2 people can handle that. If we had unions and union negotiations that we would need to be going through, then yes, we would need more individuals.
Okay. Councilman Nicholson?
I know we've talked in the past about the HRIS system, essentially our payroll system that has those capabilities and expanding the use of that system. Are those costs then allocated, that just as a roll-through, pass-through allocation costs to the different departments for payroll purposes?
They are, yeah.
Okay. And then do we see the cost of recruiting firms and the support of those firms in each department as professional fees, or is there a separate category for professional fees that would be using for recruitment purposes?
Great question. We actually do not anticipate recruitment services in this.
I'll give my personal opinion and hope that if we go past a certain time period with positions being unfilled, that you engage with search firms. I just think it's too prudent. We've got so many opportunities on our hands that I think, my personal opinion is that we can't leave them open. And if what Director Carrington said in the past about positions being open for long periods of time, if we were unsuccessful in the past, I know we've got far more sophisticated opportunities ahead of us, but I think.
No, agreed. We absolutely can add search firm money. I will say that a lot of the positions that have gone unfilled have, in some large part, gone unfilled, not because we could not find anyone,
But it was a conscious choice, or
an unconscious conscious choice. There
got
was
you.
not an active search on.
understood. Okay, yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
As the new human resources team member, team leader, I'm intentionally being broad since I know the transition will be from manager to director. But have they had an opportunity to review what was submitted prior to their joining? And are there needs that they have identified or can identify in the coming days? So that way we can incorporate those on the front end versus, some months pass by and it's very clear and she knew from the jump that there were, sort of professional needs or supplies or services that we can incorporate now.
So that's a great question, and the answer to that is yes. So this has been shared, and she has been taking this time to determine, are there, because this budget was created before she was on board. So she's taken the time to say, okay, what additional things did you not contemplate that I am going to need? And again, we haven't made any changes to this. All of the changes will be brought to you on June 8th.
Other discussion on human resources. Pro Tem Carrington and then Councilman Parker.
Oh, yeah, just a quick statement. I definitely like that this budget definitely didn't go too far beyond the last fiscal year. And are you anticipating it getting any higher than this based on what you probably want to do with that particular department?
Getting higher.
Well, higher in needing to amend the budget to increase of the budget for that particular department.
So no, for this particular department, the only large increase, so two potential increases. One is what Councilman Nicholson just suggested, and then a second is something that is being reviewed right now, and that is the city's, and I guess it really may not show here, but that is the city's benefit package. And so, negotiating that and getting a better overall package, either meaning a better package as far as bang for the buck, or a better package, we're paying this much money and we're just going to actually get more services.
Okay. So the mayor's budget currently actually did increase the medical insurance, and some of the benefits greatly. So are you anticipating more of?
So what I'm saying is we may be able to get more actual service for the amount that we're spending as we look to change providers. That is something that the new director is looking at as we speak.
All right, thank you. No follow-up questions.
Councilman Parker.
My question got answered.
Councilwoman James.
The other professional services, could you kind of give us an example of what that looks like in HR? Would that be the recruitment services, or? You've got 25,000 that was projected for this year, and it looks like it's down to 7,500 for the mayor's recommended budget.
Job postings and advertisements.
Job postings?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilman.
And it looked like that's where they booked the consultant that was
Correct.
brought on.
Yes.
Through
Previously.
the
Okay.
end of this fiscal year. So that's why, with
Okay.
our budget amendments, in terms of the activity and projected activity. Any further discussion on human resources? We revisit now the capital improvement fund. We have Director Cooley here. If you can give us the context of street light improvements in the capital improvement fund versus street light repairs, which we've reviewed previously in the Department of Public Works proposed budget.
We have like 213 in there now, right?
Item 448, Department 448.
Okay, so currently in this fiscal year, we have $213,000 in that line item, and that is for the upgrade of the LED lights that we're doing on Orchard Lake Road. So we're changing all the mercury vapor bulbs to a LED light format, and that's going from Woodward Avenue all the way to Old Telegraph. Existing poles that are up, they'll all be changed over to LED lighting. The $100,000 was put in there for next year for something similar. It was kind of to be determined. We hadn't really picked a street yet, but it will be a stretch of road where we'll change the lights from mercury vapor to a LED portion. As we do these stretches of roadway this way, we get money off on our yearly rates from DTE because we're going to a more efficient bulb. So the difference is that we're upgrading a street versus actual repairs of something that is out or broken.
So in terms of the message that I sent last night, Councilwoman Rutherford and I shared in terms of all the lights being off from Voorhees to Telegraph on Orchard Lake Road, does that mean we can look forward to beautiful, brilliant LED lights coming in that through
as
the
you
dark?
ride it right now, they have done some of the upgrades through the median portion.
Right.
They had to run a special piece of equipment to get high enough in that median and not tear up the grass. So those have been repaired. There was a DTE issue in that section that's out completely right now. There's a fuse blown at a transformer. I'm working with DTE to get that transformer repaired. But now you'll see them start to work through. They can use their normal truck on those poles, so they're working through, and they'll replace all those all the way to Old Telegraph as well.
But that's helpful. So in terms of capital improvement fund, street light improvements, that's an LED.
Just like an upgrade, or we have done in a past, it was several years past, we did a pole upgrade as well, where we upgraded all the poles down through Perry Street, where we took down the old steel poles and put up new aluminum poles. So it's been done at different times, different ways, but currently we're just doing the LED portion.
Councilwoman James and then Mayor Grimel, then Councilman Parker.
Okay, two questions. The infrastructure improvements for streetlights, does that come out of your budget?
In terms of
Does
repairs.
does that come out of the DPW budget?
So this one we're currently talking about comes out of the capital improvement budget. The repairs are coming out of, the repair line item comes out of major streets, the Act $51.
So infrastructure would be considered repairs? Is that,
If it's not a complete infrastructure replacement, but the small infrastructure replacements are coming out of repair. If we wanted to do, say, you're probably talking about the section Walton. If we wanted to go and rebore all the conduit on Walton and replace it all, that would probably be a capital improvement project.
okay. Then the other question is, do you anticipate using all of this $213,000 that was to go toward these upgrades? Because it shows that only 76 or less than half of that amount has actually been spent, and we're a month now from the end of the fiscal year. Do you anticipate actually using all of this money?
So the money was booked into a wrong line item and needs to be moved over. We've spent $105,000 of that dollars already on the actual purchase of the LED light heads. And they're currently in the process of doing the repairs of the change out. So we should have that invoice before the end of the month.
Okay.
I don't believe we're going to spend the whole $213,000. I believe we're probably going to have maybe $40,000 of this money left over. It's not going to cost as much as we originally anticipated.
Mayor Grimel.
Regarding Walton Boulevard and the lighting there between Baldwin West to the border with Waterford Township, that would require quite a bit, based on what you just indicated and what Deputy Mayor Stevens indicated earlier. That would require quite a bit of infrastructure replacement, it sounds like. You've indicated that if that work were to be done, it would come out of the capital improvements fund in all likelihood. That would be your recommendation anyway. How, do you have a sense of how much it would cost to do that work or that repair work west from Baldwin to the city boundary?
It's been a few years ago, but we did do a quote on doing a different section of Walton, and then it was actually from Baldwin to Joslin. So it's probably a similar length of stretch, and it was probably that was right close to $300,000 to rebore all the conduit and pull wire through. Like I say, that was probably 3 years ago now, so costs have greatly increased. I would put it upwards of maybe 500,000 to do that type of work now. A lot of the issues that happen out there, the way our infrastructure was placed, it was placed behind the curb. So anytime we go in to do street repairs, a lot of times when they do those joint repairs and they cut the sections of concrete out for joint repair, there's some incidental cutting into the conduit because it's so close to behind the curb. And then that's what's happening now as we did all those repairs in that section, and we're finding these different cuts and breaks within the conduit that the contractor has to go out, dig up, make a replacement for, and repair that wiring.
So with the contractor doing that work, is that covered within the existing cost of that repair contract? Or to what extent do we bear additional expense as a result of that?
The city bears most of them costs just because there's no possible way for the contractor to make those cuts without hitting the electrical because of the way it was originally placed. It was originally placed so close to the curb line that there's no way for them to go in and make the repairs without having these incidental problems. We do include a certain length of repairs within the contracts that the city doesn't bear. That's all part of the bid process. But once they hit those lengths, then we bear them as a city.
So under the lighting contract, the lighting repair contractor is responsible for repairs up to a maximum length of wiring. And after that, we bear the expense?
No, I'm saying when we bid out a section of roadway, we include, say, 300 feet of conduit replacement or repair. So as that contractor is going in and digging out joints, if he pulls out some of that conduit, there's so much of it included in with the bid contract of the replacement of the joints or the replacement of the road if we rebuild it. Anything over and above that, then we have our contractors make the replacement, and it comes out of our repair bills, our repair line item under the major streets.
Okay, I got it. And so, and that's I guess what I'm trying to get at is under our contract with the lighting repair contractor, what are the terms of that contract in terms of what they're responsible for as part of their ordinary responsibility to maintain and repair lighting in the city versus how much of that additional cost falls on us?
So we pay that contractor on a
Hourly basis?
Hourly basis for investigation. When they're doing, if we need a section of conduit bored, there's a per foot price to bore it, a per foot price to pull the new wire through. Then we pay for the wiring. That's the way the contract is based. So once we go into, okay, we know we're going to bore from this point to this point, they're no longer on an hourly rate. They're on the per foot rate, and that's what includes all that work that they do. The only point that we pay an hourly rate is the investigation to actually find the spot that needs to be repaired. And then there's other line items in there as so much to change a bulb, so much to change a ballast, so much to change a fuse, so much to change a breaker, those type of line items.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Councilman Parker?
Thank you. And Mayor, he may have actually answered this question, but as I was talking with Mr. Siddiqui before he left, particularly in regards to some of the repair that was done on University close to Palmer Street, he shared that because the lights keep going out, and they've been out to repair them multiple times, and they keep going out, that there is a disconnect between current wiring and old wiring that requires a little bit more effort, a little bit more infrastructure detail work to be done. And
So the issue over by University in Palmer is another issue that is related to DTE. It's a little technical to make the explanation. There's two legs that come into our LC 73, which is our control box. There's a photo eye on top of it. When it gets dark, that photo eye clicks, sends power down both legs, and the both legs go the opposite way. They had a transformer blow over there, and we typically have 250 go to each leg. When they redone that, they put 250 to the box, so it only has 110 going down each leg. It won't carry the power to light the lights. We've had several conversations with DTE. We had the same issue about 2 years ago on Featherstone when they replaced the transformer, and we're doing everything we can to get that. Basically, they got to hang a second transformer back up and make it so that we can have the correct power to run that whole stretch of lighting.
So does that come out of, which gets me to my question though, is that out of the capital improvement or the repair budget?
That is a DTE issue, and they pay for that themselves.
Well, that's my question.
Until it gets past that LC 73, everything above that is a DTE issue, and they pay for that. When it gets past that LC 73 and goes into our stuff, then we pay for it.
Thank you, sir.
Any further discussion on capital improvement funds, specifically street lighting improvements? We're delighted that you were here to be able to answer those questions in person. Thank you for your time. We move now to communications and cable budget administration.
Thank you. We do have with us today the cable manager, but also we have, again, Director Carrington. I'm trying to get to that specific budget, cable fund, and...
Director Carrington, Fund 231, the cable fund. It might make sense, the second page for council's benefit. The revenues. So we see AT&T PEG fees, Comcast PEG fees, and we spoke previously about investment income, so I'll set that aside for now. So we are anticipating a uniform set revenue amount for those PEG fees, which generates, or slightly less than what was in the previous amended budget. But $118,000 is what's generated, and there will be costs that extend beyond that. So the PEG fees help pay a portion of, but don't cover all expenses for this, the cable fund appropriations, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And so it pulls from general fund, it will need general fund revenues to make up that difference, or
Well,
is it coming from another revenue
So
source?
part of it, that this fund has built up a significant fund balance through the years.
Okay.
In part because there hasn't been a lot of spending on some of the capital things associated with the cable fund. And so, to that extent, the fund balance is serving as the source of funding for, the amount of expenses over the revenues.
Deputy Mayor and Finance Director, what should we anticipate prospectively with the reorganization of the communications department, if you will? Will cable functions still have this sort of set-aside cable fund, and are you working out a new communications department, if you will, and appropriations for it, or is that still being worked through?
So currently within the budget, we do have a communications director that's been added to this budget, to the extent that we will be working through the specific responsibilities for that position. Currently, it's all being contained. If you recall, some of the other director positions that covered multiple departments that was spread around and allocated to other funds and departments. We currently have not done that in this.
It's entirely housed within.
It's entirely housed. I expect that we will look to allocate that based on the position and the responsibilities and roles with the position.
We spoke about the $750,000 that have been transferred to the Capital Improvement Fund, anticipating that not all of that will be actualized. Does that remain in sort of the cable element of the capital improvement fund, or are you anticipating future return transfers?
So just from a purely accounting standpoint, whatever goes unspent, whether it was, budgeted or projected or what have you, whatever goes unspent, in this instance, it would be returned back to the cable fund. Or, because it has not been, if it's not appropriated within the capital improvement fund specifically for the cable fund, then from a purely accounting aspect, we would be returning those funds back to the cable fund.
Councilman Goodman?
She says, just to clarify, and Attorney Sharp help me out as well, because that 750 was meant for, again, the improvements that had to happen inside of council chambers, not just solely what's happening down in cable in terms of equipment improvements.
Correct.
Right, so I think that's also what it is.
Legislative Council Sharp?
So what was it, a little less than $300,000 that council approved, where is that being reflected?
I'm sorry, what are you referring to?
The amount the council approved for the upgrades for cable,
Uh-huh.
where is that being reflected?
That's being reflected in the capital investment fund. Council, my recollection is council approved those specific contracts for the already appropriated budget items. So those monies are being, those were the specific amounts and expenditures that were approved to go against that 750 that had been appropriated in this fiscal year's budget.
Right, which is a little less than 300, and I'm saying, where is that being, I don't.
It hasn't been booked yet, or?
It hasn't been fully booked, but it's coming out of that 750,000 in the capital improvement fund specifically for the cable fund.
And so, I guess to date, is there any reason why some of that's not being shown when a lot of that has been purchased in terms of that equipment?
It's just, we have not, we believe it's been purchased, it just has not been paid. We haven't paid for a lot of that equipment yet. I know a lot of it has been ordered, but it has not yet been paid and hit the city's financials.
And while he's coming up, Deputy Mayor Stevens, did you want to?
Oh, no, I was just.
Okay, great.
Motion, yes.
Welcome, Mr. Brown.
How you doing this afternoon? So some of the equipment have been paid for, but before I pay them, they're downstairs. They're already hooked up. But before I pay them, I want to make sure it works. And then some of the equipment hasn't came, like some of our equipment hasn't came because of the supply chain issue. But what has been paid has been approximately about, so far, about 130,000. That's approximately, if I'm right, and that's an estimate. I can't give you the exact number.
Councilman Goodman.
But
Oh, I'm sorry.
so far with that complete project, it's about 85% done. We can't test it because we're having all these meetings and we want to switch over real soon. But we'll be commissioning actually tomorrow evening. And but like I said, some of the equipment hasn't came, and we're still waiting for it. Like our mics, for example, our mic system, and we found out last week. I told you in the committee that they're expected in September.
Councilman Goodman, you have the floor.
So, and Phil, this isn't towards you. So with that being said, I guess the question I have is how much of those purchases, and this goes to finance director and the administration, how much of those purchases that have already been made have, well, I say should realistically have been reflected here? Because to date, for there to be over $100,000 in expenditures, I would assume that since we've approved this a decent amount of time ago, that some of that would have better been reflected up to this point. And again, I could be wrong, and it may have not gotten to the point of being reflected in the budget. It just seems that it, by now, something should be there, even if it's not the entire amount for the project. Because right now, we've only seen actualized, for cable specifically, in capital improvements, just shy of $40,000. So I was just wondering if, there is any updates to those numbers from finance at all up to this point. And we're looking back at the capital improvements for cable, since we're in that discussion in terms of the money that was budgeted from capital
Right.
improvements for that project.
Yeah, no, I follow your question. I think that the best thing would, I can just pull the activity that we actually have in the system that goes against this project and give you, because we both, we encumber funds and we can show what's been encumbered. When I say encumbered, meaning that, the, director will say, hey, these are the items that we're going to purchase. We provide a purchase order, which we did to the vendor, and then as those invoices are received and paid, we will then issue a check, and that's that activity. So I can pull those both of those numbers showing what we've encumbered in the budget and what we've actually spent against those purchase orders.
All right, I greatly appreciate that. And then actually, I'll stop there for right now. So thank you.
Mayor Bramwell, did you have a hand?
Well, I just had a question myself, which is the entirety of that 750,000 originated in the cable fund, is my understanding, and through really PEG fees essentially over some long period of time, and then was transferred to the capital improvements fund for disbursement in order to purchase the requisite equipment and other cable infrastructure. Is that accurate?
That is, yes.
So my question is, and maybe this was asked and answered while I was out of the room, in which case I apologize, but why transfer it first to the capital improvements fund? Why not just expend it directly out of the cable fund?
Primarily because the city has used the capital improvement fund for purposes of trying to put capital expenditures into one single, fund for better tracking, as opposed to it being in a number of different funds. So it's just an accounting preference that the city has utilized, and so we put the expenditures there. They can very easily could have remained in, but we just transfer the funding over and book the expenditures against that capital improvement fund.
Okay, thanks.
Anything further?
Well, I just want to excuse myself. I have to speak at a graduation ceremony at 6 o'clock, and so I'm going to head out now. I know that you're in good hands with the deputy mayor remaining with you. So if you have any questions that are specifically for me in the next 10 minutes before we have to adjourn, just reach out and let me know.
Understood.
All right.
Anything further about capital improvements with cable, or can we move to the cable itself? Any further discussion or questions about cable and communications? Is there anything further on capital improvements? I'm in cable, so. Okay, so cable. Councilman Goodman.
So I do have a couple questions when I go through this line item by line item. So I do see that there is 2 line items for video equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason for that? And I do see that there's a difference between video equipment supplies and video equipment outright. Is there a reason for those 2 separate funds?
Those 2 separate accounts?
Yes, because at this time, they are both also budgeted for 10 grand for the upcoming fiscal year.
And I'm sorry, you said
So
video.
it would be line item 231-291-735.000 for the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second one would be the last line item in cable. So it'd be 231-291-977.014.
Yeah, and I think this is, depending upon, it can be somewhat of a gray area. The difference between video equipment supplies and video equipment. We have a similar setup with computer. You'll see computer equipment and computer supplies. Exactly how that distinction, I think that gets to somewhat of a technical distinction.
Mr. Brown, do you want to offer the technical distinction?
Okay, so going forward, the difference between that is you have video equipment. You have video equipment, which is the actual camera, but then you have supplies, maybe a tripod, or ongoing supplies such as media. And that's an example.
So
And, or batteries.
So thank you for that clarification. That does help out. The next one that I have, and this is not exactly in the best order, so we might be hopping back and forth a little bit. For training expenses, which is 231-291-957.002, would it be safe to make the assumption that, because I believe there was an increase for training in communications?
So that was one of the items that we had flagged. It was a typo. It didn't carry through. And wherever you have a full-time employee, there should be $4,000. So 4,000 times the number of full-time employees. And so here, I believe there are going to be a total of 3 that are booked to this department. So you have the cable manager, the assistant, and then the communications director.
And so we're all budgeting that into cable because cable is what currently exists.
Correct.
Okay, so yes, that is the thing that I'm glad that has been
Great
flagged
point, yeah,
already.
so $12,000 we should anticipate will be something we'll want to make a change for.
And then the other one I wanted to inquire about is the other professional services. So what was that used for up to date? Since I do see that there was a budgeted amount for 5,500, we expended close to 30,000. Direct activity is lower than that for some reason.
So,
and then there is nothing there. So I just want to know what.
Yeah. So some of that other professional services is work that was being done related to some of the equipment installation and repairs and everything. And so some of that we expect is going to be reallocated. The larger portion of that is Mr. Robinson, who's been working in the department as a contractor. So we've been paying him out of that category. That was something that was brought to council.
But going forward will be a salary expense.
But we did add a full-time position in the budget for that role. So that's really the source of the increase from the current 74,000 budgeted amount to the $200,000. We added 2 additional employees in this department.
All right, and then the last one is asking about the very, very small line item for services, communications, telephone. Because, and excuse me if I've missed this up to date. I figured that I've noticed that we've been kind of coalescing the costs for things such as like telephone services, that we've been trying to put them collectively in one spot. Is that correct?
So, So we did place those largely within the IT department, just so there wouldn't be all of these small increments across the budget. For funds outside of general fund, we are maintaining those because that is an expense that we are paying out of general fund. But we are, if it's not a general fund department, we want to, in that case, we do want to maintain it for that particular department that lies outside of the general fund.
So to better understand that, cable. So is cable. Sorry. I guess the main question I'm asking is there a reason for maintaining cable specifically having that line item, or can it not be moved into IT?
They want the cable fund to pay for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So what I was trying to say is that
because it's paid out of the cable or out of the PEG funds,
out of something that's being paid for by a non-general fund,
and so to keep it there.
Keep it there, correct.
All right, that's it from me.
Other discussion, Councilwoman James.
What is the anticipated budget for the cable fund for 2020? I see the recommended budget, but what is the anticipated budget for it?
Are you speaking for next fiscal year?
Yes.
So next fiscal year, it would be the total appropriation amount that you see there towards the bottom, that $338,000 number.
The 330. Okay, so that's the okay. That's a big difference. Has there been a change in looking at the beginning fund balance of over $1 million
So the big thing from this fiscal year is that there was 750,000 that was initially appropriated purely for capital investment or capital improvements.
Okay.
Not having that in this current fiscal year's budget is the biggest reason for the change between what's in next fiscal year's proposed budget and the current fiscal year's approved budget.
So the 338,000 is the average, it's the average budget for cable. That's,
That right. So that $991,000 is somewhat of a I don't want to say an anomaly, but it's unique because that includes the $750,000 in capital expenditures.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor Stevens.
Yeah, so I was just going to say exactly what Director Carrington said. If you look at the subtotal, totals for Department 291 cable, $241,179 versus $338,539. Those are the numbers that you really want to look at. That 750,000 is all capital improvements, and so then you take that and you add it to the operating budget, and that's how you get the almost $1 million that was originally scheduled to be spent this year. But that 750,000 is an actual anomaly that you would not see in a regular year.
The time is 5:56 p.m. At 6 o'clock p.m., we will be ejecting ourselves from these seats so that the Planning Commission meeting can begin promptly. There were no requests for public comment. No one signed up for public comment this evening. Councilman Goodman, you're next on the speakers list.
So I do have one final question, and Phil, I think this is a question that goes to you. So I do see in here the line item for cable/video equipment repairs. The current budget is $500. It does not even carry over whatsoever. Is there a reason why there is no line item scheduled for repairs, just as a preventative?
Well, I don't know. I believe we should have repairs in it, because, and that should go with other professional services, because we have our usual vendors for our sound and usual vendors for our cable. So I don't know.
Because as an former IT professional, as you know, like it scares me when I look at all that equipment in that office. Considering that I have to go down there every now and then and go into a room where it has to be air conditioned and fans, so nothing catches on fire. I'm worried that when we look at this and we see that there's nothing in there for other professional services or for repairs, that kind of comes off as if we're not attempting to repair things, but if it breaks, we'll buy a new one. Because there is nothing in here even remotely considering something breaking.
Yeah, and I think part of that, we've tried to limit the amount of small dollar general ledger accounts, just from a presentation standpoint and a management standpoint, particularly for things that could very well go into other categories. I certainly think, and I've discussed this with Mr. Brown, we want to make sure that we are allocating enough, even given the fact that we're spending a large amount of money currently for the equipment. We do want to make sure that we, whether it's in computer equipment or another category.
But solely for the sake of time, given the question that I've asked, is there a specific spot within cable's current budget that we're looking at that those repairs would come out of, since there is no line item directed to it?
Yeah, I would certainly point to, and I think we discussed this, the computer equipment, video equipment would be things that Mr. Brown could certainly utilize for those purposes, for that $500 that's not carrying over.
Thank you.
Were there any final items for cable and communications, or can we consider that one? We can revisit that at our next budget session, but I want to understand if that chapter is closed. Seems like cable and communications, that chapter is closed. Thank you for your time. So at our next session, we will start with IT, the Parking Enterprise Fund, and then we will transition into amendments. Is there, and changes that we want to see incorporated. Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Support.
Moved by Goodman, seconded by Nicholson. Hearing no discussion, roll call, Clerk Grandison on adjournment.
Nicholson,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Harrington,
Yes.
Goodman,
Yes.
James. Yes. McGinnis.
Yes.
6-0.
That motion carries. We stand adjourned at 5:59 p.m. Thank you for your time. And let's flop our names over so that way the Planning Commission can have a swift transition.